One day a crack appeared in the sky. From there, blue mana rained down on the people. It accumulated in everyone's body, but only a few received the most mana. They were later called the Awakened. These people have the ability to acquire skills. The mana stopped falling, but the crack in the sky remained. Shortly after, gates began to appear all over the world. They lead to a dungeon with monsters. To prevent otherworldly beings from entering the human world, the Awakened ones set out to clear them out. One of them was the main character Shin Joon-seoh. His body had absorbed only D-rank mana. The guy managed to awaken the rare skill Weapon Maker in himself. However, his low mana prevented him from joining the Monster Hunter team, but a miracle happened. He was accepted by the Daven Guild as a support. It was with them that the main character went to his first dungeon. The entire team died in the fight against the main monster, and Joon-seoh was on the verge of death, but he didn't want to die. At the last moment, the system appeared with a notification about assigning the status of player. Then the main character received memories from his past life. The body was filled with mana and a still unknown power. Thanks to the knowledge he gained, the boy found a way to defeat the monster, although he himself did not fully understand what was happening to him. The day that Joon-seoh had been waiting for so long had come. He will enter the dungeon for the first time as a support. However, the boy was late. Fortunately, the team didn't scold him for this. The female fighter and the C-rank defender waited patiently for the hero. At this point, the group leader Toyun, the B-rank hunters, and the mage had already entered the dungeon. Joon-seoh focused on making a good impression. The Daven Guild is the first to agree to accept the hero into the team. At the gate, Toyun explained that Joon-seoh shouldn't stand too close to the fighters so as not to be drawn into the battle. But it's also not worth standing too far away, because then they won't be able to protect him. The boy's task is to create daggers in time, and it will take the hero at least 20 seconds to do this. Suddenly, the magician felt the energy of the monsters. One of them was very strong, so the hunter assumed it was the boss. The local monsters turned out to be crystal lizards. The team quickly started the fight. The defender was the first to act. One of the monsters was destroyed by a female fighter. With the power of fire, the magician instantly got rid of the other two monsters. Their work was so coordinated that Joon-seoh froze in admiration. But the group leader urged the boy to create a weapon. After receiving the dagger, he used the shadow weapon skill, and then he destroyed the boss in one attack. After that, the weapon dissolved. No one was injured. The main character chided himself for being distracted, but the team was satisfied with the guy's work. They need Joon-seoh because the weapon cannot withstand the team leader's skill and disappears after he uses it. And thanks to the hero's ability to create weapons, Toyun saves a lot of money. Suddenly, an earthquake began. The ice wall began to collapse. A path opened ahead. The hunters hoped that it led to treasure since the boss dungeon had already been destroyed. The magician didn't feel any energy either, and so the team decided to check this area. But it all ended in disaster. That path led to an ice monster whose rank was higher than it should have been. He caught up with Joon-seoh and struck. All the team members were already dead. The guy tried to defend himself with a homemade dagger, but the ice monster repelled this attempt. The enraged creature hit the ice and a breach formed. Joon-seoh fell and dived into the water. He knew he was too weak to fight the ice monster, but he didn't want to die. The main character finally managed to find the team that needed him, but they all died. There came a moment when the boy could no longer hold his breath, and then the system appeared before him. She reported that Joon-seoh had met all the conditions to become a player. In addition, he still has a chance to receive an award. The guy was confused. What was going on? Being on the verge, Joon-seoh presses the Get Reward button. In an instant, he received memories from his past life. Mana filled his body. Johnson got out of the water and stood before the monster again. Now he can create not one dagger, but many. The main character attacked the monster with a mass of swords. Incomprehensible memories swirled in his head. At the same time, the ice monster attacked him again. But a miracle happened. The hero managed to block the blow. Moreover, now he knew that he was fighting against a golem-like monster. He has no weaknesses and is able to recover. Suddenly, Joon-seoh realized that he had to attack from all sides at once. Only then would he have a chance of winning. The guy instantly created a net around the enemy. Now he can control the monster. Meanwhile, along the entire perimeter of the grid, Joon-seoh began creating daggers. And then he hit the monster with all his weapons at the same time. The main character won. He had the World of the Grid skill before, but Joon-seoh had no idea that it could be used for attack. Suddenly, energy began to be released from the monster's body. The system reported the activation of the passive skill Magic Absorption. The guy had never encountered anything like this before, and he still didn't understand what past life meant. In the memories he received, Joon-seoh saw himself clearly. His world is destroyed. He assumed that all those terrible things could happen in the future. However, this looks like a chance to change everything. Joon-seoh's life, compared to his memories, is different in some ways. The list of skills has been updated with new items. Rent payment and communication have appeared. In addition, the system assigned the title Player to the main character. These are called the Chosen Awakened Ones. The leader of Johnson's first team, Toyun, was also a player. Only he could see the mysterious system. In addition, players receive rewards, power, and special abilities. This allowed them to develop faster than other awakened ones. Thanks to Toyun, the Daven Guild gained first-class status. Joon-seoh had nothing to do with it, but he felt an incentive for development. Among the new skills, the hero also has another passive magic absorption. Once the amount of magic exceeds the limit, Joon-seoh will receive a reward. The guy has already figured out how to use it, but first he wanted to take care of the bodies of his comrades. After returning from the dungeon, Joon-seoh first visited the headquarters of the Hunters Association. There, they were suspicious of the D-rank support, who turned out to be the only survivor. But all evidence of a possible crime disappeared along with the gate to the dungeon. Similar situations happen very often. Instead of informing the association about the gate, the hunters for some reason secretly go there. The association pays generously for finding the gates, but permission to pass through them can be obtained at an auction. Small guilds like Davens have virtually no chance of winning at the auction, and therefore they lose the opportunity to enter the dungeon and choose a dangerous path. Everything seemed clear, but the head of the maintenance squad felt that something was wrong with the case with Joon-seoh. After what happened, the guy should have been in a panic. Instead, he behaved too calmly and answered clearly. In addition, he delivered the bodies of his comrades to the association. A similar feeling did not leave the main character on the way home. He clearly remembered the gate application form approved by the association. However, this dungeon is registered as unknown at headquarters. It turns out that someone deceived the Daven Guild, or maybe the association itself is involved. What worried Johnson most was the thought that there were too many such cases. All the news is about this, and in each such group there was a player. It turns out that someone wants to wipe out all the heroes from the face of the earth, and so Joon-seoh decided to hide his abilities so as not to be exposed, and he will use this time to activate and develop his own skills. Fortunately, the guy has a skill that will allow him to develop quickly and not attract attention. Rent fee will help a lot with this. A year passed. The hunters continued to raid the gate. One of the teams encountered a bug in the dungeon again. Instead of an E rank, the monster had a D rank. The weapon of the only fighter in the group broke. The monster continued to attack. The team found itself in a critical situation. Their opponent is the Knoll Lord. He is super strong and resistant to magic. The defender tried to contain the monster while the others came up with a solution. The group leader relied on magic, as E-rank monsters are sensitive to it. But the appearance of the Knoll Lord completely changed the balance of power. The hunters fell into despair. Joon-seoh was also in this dungeon, but he came there as an assistant. The main character's task is to collect magic stones. Assistants are considered errand boys, so they don't get much recognition. Suddenly, the group leader noticed how Joon-seoh had created a pickaxe for himself. It was a chance. He instantly asked the protagonist to create a sword, but Joon-seoh stuck to his plan and didn't intend to betray his own abilities, so he refused. The group leader was stunned. They'll all die soon, and the assistant will also be kicking. There was no way out. Joon-seoh agreed to fulfill the request, as long as everyone forgot about his skills after clearing the gate. And in addition, he wants to receive a support salary. The team leader was indignant, but the main character gave a guarantee that with his weapon, the hunters would definitely be able to clear the dungeon. Meanwhile, the association offered cooperation to the Mass Murder Guild, one of the three largest. They were forced to do this because errors in dungeon ranks had already become a regular occurrence. Usually everyone died in such cases, but the news reported a successful dungeon clearing with a mistake. Guild leader Tae-hyung noticed Joon-seoh on the screen and he seemed familiar. Recently, a man was near a dungeon with an A-rank bug, and I saw the main character there who was part of the team at the time as an assistant. The number of times a dungeon has been successfully cleared with a mistake can be counted on the fingers of one hand, and Joon-seoh has already been on the lucky teams twice. Tae-hyung felt that this was no coincidence. The Hunters Association analyzes the gates. They are the ones that announce the rank of the dungeon, and therefore, due to numerous mistakes, everyone began to criticize the association. In addition, the head of the Mass Murder Guild has his own problems. No weapon can withstand his skill, so he's trying to find someone who could make him at least an A-rank weapon. Among all the possible options, the best thing Secretary Hisu found was a B-rank sword made by a Japanese blacksmith. Suddenly, a guild employee reported that their people had ended up at the gate by mistake. A D-rank dungeon is now C-rank. Taehyung decided to personally go to help. A crowd of journalists greeted the head of the guild with numerous questions, but the man was only interested in the situation in the dungeon. The hunters had been there for 2 hours, so Taehyung was preparing for the worst. The man always carried a suitcase with weapons. But first he decided to test the sword obtained by the secretary. Hisu is a B-rank support and has the ability to open hidden space. Therefore, the girl kept the weapon in a tiny handbag. The man activated encroachment and hit the goal. This skill can destroy any wall in the form of a barrier. Only one user can go through this path. After using the skill, the weapon began to crumble. Taehyung went to the dungeon with his suitcase. Almost immediately near the entrance lay several dead-level D lizardmen. The man moved on. He was afraid to see a terrible picture there, but he was stunned. The entire team fought the monsters. But suddenly, one of the fighters lost his weapon. The lizard man attacked, but failed to hit the target. He was stopped by Johnson's weapon. Taehyung thought it was magic. But then I noticed that this was the work of the main character. Joon-seoh counted the hunters. He knew for sure that 9 people had entered the gate. But now there were 10 of them. The lizard men began to win. The guild leader rushed to help, grabbing one of the swords with him. Who would have thought that Yoon Taehyung himself would come to the rescue? The guild leader attacked the monster. First, the man disarmed the lizard man, and then he tore him apart in just one attack. Taehyung held back the power of his skill, but his sword began to crumble anyway. Now the man could only block the monster's blows. He needs another sword to attack. This was noticed by Joon-seoh. He realized that the guild leader's weapon could not withstand his skill. The protagonist offered his sword. Only if Taehyung forgets about his skills. The man was impressed by Joon-seoh's skill, but he did not agree to his condition. The protagonist began to dissolve the created weapon. Only then did the guild leader promise to forget everything. With a new sword and new powers, Taehyung rushed into battle. Just from the very attempt to block the blow, the enemy's weapon fell apart. The guild leader realized that the assistant was far from simple, and his creation had power in itself. Then he decided to test how strong the sword was in his hands. The man struck the first blow. Then he hurried to attack a second time because he was afraid that the sword would fall apart. The axe pierced the lizard man's skull, and then he noticed with surprise that there was not a single scratch left on the weapon. The rescued team began to thank for their rescue. They all admitted that they were holding on thanks to Joon-seoh's weapons. The assistant seriously interested Taehyung, and he wanted to know more about this person, but the main character only said his name. He was already about to leave the dungeon, but the guild leader asked the boy to go with him to the boss's room. Since this is a dungeon with a bug, it doesn't hurt to be extra careful. Joon-seoh agreed, although he was sure that his sword would not fall apart. The boss turned out to be no easy task. A C-rank lizard lord awaited the hunters. Despite its small size, this creature surpasses its kind in strength and speed. Out of habit, Taehyung set out to quickly deal with the monster while his weapon was still intact. The lizard lord was not alone. Next to him lay a giant reptile capable of breathing flame, and she was the first to rush into battle. But Taehyung dodged this time. It is important for him to use his strength rationally, and so the guild leader targeted the boss. Their swords clashed, but none managed to strike. The dungeon boss rode a reptile. At his command, the creature generated a fire attack. At that moment, Taehyung noticed an unknown barrier in front of him. It was a protective shield created by the main character. The guy managed to surprise the guild head again. How many other abilities does this assistant hide? While Taehyung was distracted, the reptile lord threw a chain on his sword. The man didn't put up much resistance. He was deliberately stalling to learn more about Joon-seoh. But now the lizard lord pulled on the chain and nearly threw Taehyung into the reptile's mouth. The main character was again forced to intervene. He nullified the captured weapon and instantly recreated it in another location. Then Taehyung struck and destroyed the reptile. It was the boss's turn. The guild leader attacked. The lizard lord lost his arm, but now he realized that first he needed to get rid of his assistant. And so he rushed to attack Joon-seoh. The guy didn't even move. He blocked the blow with the shield he created. Meanwhile, Taehyung had already come to the rescue and finished off the monster. The hunters left the gate. Journalists attacked the head of the guild with a multitude of questions. Every hunter on the team said that they only managed to survive thanks to Taehyung. Meanwhile, the main character gave up the bags of mana stones and hurried to disappear from the scene. The guild leader was not going to hide the truth. Things might not have ended so well if it weren't for Joon-seoh, but the team had no idea what Taehyung was talking about. They all forgot that the assistant had created a weapon for them, thanks to which they managed to hold out for so long. Taehyung remembered how the assistant had set a condition to forget about his skills when they left the dungeon. The guy didn't give up the weapon until Taehyung agreed to do so. The guild leader guessed that Joon-seoh had used the skill rent fee. But how can a D-rank support use A-rank skills and even higher? The main character was nowhere to be seen. Hoping to catch up with the guy, the guild leader rushed to search, but it was all in vain. Fortunately, Taehan knows his name, so he will be able to find this unusual assistant. And so it happened. Secretary Min Hee-soo quickly located the main character. But the girl didn't understand why the guild head was so interested in a D-rank support. And this is logical because only Tae-hyung knows that the boy has the A-rank skill rent payment. There is nothing about this in Jong-seon's resume, and his past is quite modest. Tae-hyung didn't understand why the owner of a skill that could make him rich would use it as a cover. Such a weapon creator could easily gain a level. The guild chairman hoped to clarify this issue at the next meeting. He still can't forget the feeling when he picked up the sword created by Joon-seoh. All his life, Tae-hyung has been searching for weapons. He turned to the best blacksmiths. The man managed to destroy monsters. However, after the first use of the skill, the weapon fell apart. The same thing happened every time. Only with Jin-seon's weapon did the guild leader feel free. It was an unusual sword. It seemed to Tekken that he no longer needed to restrain his own strength. He felt he could do things he had never done before due to lack of suitable weapons, and therefore the guild head could not miss such a talent. He canceled an important meeting and headed to the gate where Jong-seon was currently staying. Meanwhile, the team the main character went with defeated the last monster. The hunters felt the power of Jin-seon's weapon and could not rejoice in it. No one had any idea that a D-rank support was capable of such a thing. The group leader even decided to invite the main character to his guild. While collecting mana stones, Joon-seoh kept thinking about his first dungeon. After he defeated the ice golem-like monster, that amount of mana never returned. Now it is no more than that of an awakened D level. But fortunately, this does not affect the quality of the weapon's creation. However, the more mana you put into creating a sword, the more special it will be. The level of understanding of the creation process also has a great impact. Therefore, the main character studied the materials, went to support training, and worked in the blacksmith's workshop. The only thing that Jong-seon lacks is mana. Items that depend on mana are very expensive. Fortunately, there are potions, but they're not so easy to get with an assistant's salary. Now, the main character has the goal of collecting the amount of magic necessary to receive the reward. There is still 20% left. For just one dungeon, you can get a little more than 1%. To speed up this process, you can go to the gate with a mistake. The problem is that the error only appears after entering the dungeon. And if it weren't for Tae-hyung, last time everything could have ended tragically. The team managed to clear the area and left the dungeon. Thanks to the rent payment skill, everyone forgot about Joon-seoh. But a surprise awaited the boy. This skill didn't work on the guild leader, and now he wanted to talk to the guy. Johnson understood what was going on. The mass murder guild is one of the best in Korea, so he couldn't join it. Having come up with an important meeting, Joon-seoh hurried to leave. But Tae-hyung insisted on talking. In the end, the main character agreed. The guy wanted to know if the rent payment had worked at least a little on Taehan. The heroes stopped at a restaurant. Tae-hyung didn't pull the trigger and got straight to business. He is a berserker. For such people, the main thing is to find a suitable weapon. The guild leader tested the products of the best blacksmiths he could find. He even turned to weapons makers. Insane amounts of money were flying around, and the man never got what he wanted. No sword could withstand the strain of his skill, except for the sword created by Jong-seoh. After listening, the main character realized that rent payment didn't work at all on Taehan. Who would have thought that the guild leader would be able to neutralize this effect? From now on, Jong-seoh will be more careful with high-ranking hunters. Tae-hyung suggested that the hero join the mass murder guild. He promised to pay 10 billion won just for admission, and with each contract extension, increase this amount by another 10%. That wasn't all, but Jong-seoh was quick to refuse. The thing is, the guy isn't going to join any of the guilds right now. Besides, the hero knew that Tae-hyung would find him again, so he boldly left, thanking him for dinner. Hee-soo was stunned by the boss's proposal. She thought it was too much. But Tae-hyung was ready to do almost anything to recruit the main character. Only thanks to Jong-seon did he remember what it was like not to feel the scream of weapons. Back then, in the dungeon, the guildmaster seemed to have the power to do anything. In addition, the man spends much more on weapons per year than he offered to Jong-seon. The main character was still impressed. Who would have thought that the day would come when he would turn down one of the top 3 guilds in Korea? Meanwhile, strange things were happening in one of the dungeons. One of the hunters named Tommen opposed the team. He has already managed to destroy all but one, but the attacker was not going to delay with the latter either. The team leader tried to confront Tommen, but he was far superior in strength. Having lost his weapon, the hunter lost all hope of salvation. With one blow, the scoundrel threw the brave man against the wall. Begging for mercy only made Tommen want to get it over with as soon as possible. With a smile on his face, he delivered the final blow. Weak opponents only upset the scoundrel. To lighten his mood, Tommen took out his phone and took pictures of his victims. He already had many of these to his credit. Suddenly the boy felt a very familiar but disgusting energy. Then the priestess Morena came. These two submit to the will of the executioner. But Tommen didn't like fighting against weak opponents. He would like to engage in battle against an S-rank hunter and hoped that the priestess would arrange it for him. Morena didn't refuse. Meanwhile, she got down to business. She recreated a demonic circle over the body of the thought and infused it with infected energy. The priestess sacrificed the bodies of the hunters, and she was able to raise a demonic creature. At this time, the protagonist was about to enter the D-rank gate. But suddenly, instead of one of the team members, the head of the mass murder guild appeared. He came disguised, but the main character immediately recognized the man by the suitcase with the weapon. Joon-seoh knew that the berserker would find him, but he didn't expect it to be so fast. Now these two went into the dungeon together. Tae-hyung tried to find out the reason why the boy refused to join the guild. But Joon-seoh wasn't going to explain. Instead, his attention was drawn to the conversation of the other group members about the Henmu Guild's purchase of a C-rank gate. Tae-hyung seized this moment and used it to his advantage. He noted that members of large guilds have an advantage in purchasing gates at auction. This is of great importance to hunters. They receive recognition and awards. Unprecedented amounts of money just pour into their pockets. Also, members of large guilds receive a ticket to pass through any gate. And of course, all the valuable items they obtain remain with them. The advantages are simply innumerable, but Joon-seoh does not change his decision and again rejects Tae-hyung's offer. The team moved through a dark cave. The girl mage illuminated the space with her staff. Suddenly, the hunters came across a spider web. Everyone on this team except for Joon-seoh and Tae-hyung are rookies. According to intelligence from the Hunters Association, the local monsters are spiders. There are about 50 of them here. Each spider is only E rank. That monster's power manifests itself in the Legion. Together they reach D rank. Additionally, spider bites should be avoided as they can paralyze prey. The team began to prepare for battle. Joon-seoh would be happy to be ignored as usual, but Tae-hyung reminded that protecting assistants and supports is the duty of all hunters on the team. The monsters began to attack. The defender instantly covered the team with a shield. The girl magician attacked with an electric discharge. The fighter destroyed the spiders with a sword. The team was working great, so Tae-hyung switched his attention to Joon-seoh. The boy was going to go in search of mana stones. But on the other hand, there were already many more monsters waiting than indicated in the intelligence data. Berserk Tae-hyung activated his ability. With his fiery sword, he easily destroyed the first wave of the Legion. But by this point, the spiders had surrounded the rest of the team. Tae-hyung rushed to their aid, but he stopped because he could not leave Joon-seoh without protection. Meanwhile, the main character headed towards the spiders. He relied only on his own strength. The guy activated the World of the Grid skill. Now the monsters are under control. The small amount of mana allowed for the creation of only one sword, but the guy found a way out. In the space of the grid, Joon-seoh began to circle with his weapon, destroying the monsters one by one. Fortunately, they are not of high rank, so it was not difficult for a D-rank hunter to deal with them. Tae-hyung was stunned by what he saw. Joon-seoh destroyed all the spiders in less than 10 seconds of combat. Under the impression, the guild leader even forgot about the rest of the group. The hunters were already on the verge and could barely hold back the onslaught of monsters. Tae-hyung instantly activated his berserker ability and rushed to save the hunters. The flame of powerful skill was rekindled. The monsters didn't stand a chance against such a strong hunter. The battle ended successfully. The team could not find words to thank their savior. They had no idea that the head of the mass murder guild was nearby. The most emotional girl was the magician. She burned her idol with her loving eyes, but it was not possible to hold Tae-hyung's attention for long. The fighter and Joon-seoh have already returned from reconnaissance. There were no more monsters anywhere. There was only one place left where the hunters had not yet gone. However, the group leader refused to continue the sweep. Intelligence data is very different from reality. Novice hunters always rely on information about dungeons. Not everyone can quickly adapt to the unusual conditions of another world. The geography and the creatures that inhabit it are significantly different from those on Earth. That's why hunters with the skills of detecting or hiding traces are sent to the dungeon first. They collect the necessary information and are called scouts. Only after this does the dungeon rank increase significantly. It is unknown what awaits the hunters in the boss room. Despite this, the fighter and the mage girl wanted to continue the sweep, and Tae-hyung supported them. He came to explore this dungeon and therefore considered it necessary to find the main monster. At the same time, he hoped to learn more about the main character. In the end, the group leader agreed. He was ready to hand over the role of leader to Tae-hyung, but he insisted that everything remain as it is. The hunters continued on their way. Soon, the team found the boss's room. It is known that the main monster of this dungeon is the D-rank Legion Spider Queen. This is not a very strong monster, but you shouldn't rely on the initial information because there may be an error. The hunters went inside. Surprisingly, Taehyung didn't feel any energy, but noticing the monster in front of them, the team prepared for battle. The girl magician used an electric discharge. But when the spell was lifted, it became clear that the Spider Queen had been dead even before the attack. Obviously, something is wrong here. The team leader has ordered a retreat, but it was too late. The piercing scream of a much more powerful monster spread throughout the room. This was Arachne, a B rank. She is able to control all creatures of her kind, increases the army by capturing new territories, and is able to share power with subjects. Arachne attacked the hunters, but Taehyung managed to stop her. His weapon was already starting to crumble, so the man was in a hurry to inflict as much damage as possible. Unfortunately, he did not have time to deliver the decisive blow. The sword collapsed. Arachne attacked the unarmed Taehyung, but it failed to reach its target. Joon-seoh blocked the blow with a spiritual weapon. Now all hope rested on him. But the main character needs time to create a new sword. Nothing worked. Joon-seoh had wasted all his mana. It's a good thing he decided to take the potion with him. Only you can drink it once a day. Otherwise, you will become addicted. Instead, the effect of the potion is instant. Taehyung tried his best to stall for time. It wasn't easy for him. The enemy is very strong. Arachne's combat power is equal to 5 A-rank hunters, and therefore there will be work for the rest of the group. It is necessary to deal with the advancing army of spiders. The main character created a new weapon for everyone. The hunters could not contain their surprise. The assistant's skills were impressive, but an even greater surprise came when the team tested the weapon. Destroying monsters has become incredibly easy. The skills of each hunter have increased several times. Meanwhile, Taehyung managed to seriously injure Arachne. Only then did the man use his skill. With his next attack, he inflicted fatal damage on his opponent. It seemed that the battle was over, but then spiders started coming from all sides. They were heading towards Arachne. Within seconds, the dungeon boss began to recover. The spiders sacrificed themselves and revived the monster, and it will be like this every time, until the entire army of spiders disappears. Taehyung activated his ability again, but the sword immediately began to decay. Now Joon-seoh recognized the power of the guild head. Fortunately, this time was enough, and the main character created the best sword he could. Taehyung took up his weapon and felt that he could destroy all the monsters in one fell swoop. Berserk activated the basic skill, Explosion. His fiery power filled the entire space. This was the first time Taehyung had used a skill properly without holding back his strength. And he succeeded. Arachne and her army were destroyed. Techne always needs to calculate the force, otherwise the weapon will fly to pieces before it even attacks. Such is the price of incredible power. But thanks to Johnson's sword, this time everything was different. Taehyung was overflowing with energy and he couldn't contain it. The man literally burst into flames. But if he didn't do this, he would lose his sanity. Now the guild head no longer had any doubts. Joon-seoh is a special awakened one. If people find out about his skills, the whole world will focus on the guy. Arachne's body began to radiate infected energy. Apart from the main character, no one else saw this. Even the high-level hunter Taehyung felt nothing. To absorb energy, Joon-seoh activated a passive skill and managed to gain 100 units of mana to receive the reward. Now the hero has access to demonic weapons. It is able to be stored and materialized when needed without the additional use of mana. However, such weapons can only be used once per day. Thanks to Arachne, Joon-seoh managed to gather half of the energy needed for the next reward. But the surprises didn't end there. The head of the mass murder guild decided to apologize to the boy. He was ashamed of his persistence. The group leader saw this moment. He realized that Joon-seoh was not a simple person when the guild head himself bowed his head to him. But it is dangerous to interfere in the affairs of great people. The fighter and the mage girl have already returned from scouting the area. But before they could see anything, the group leader urged his comrades to leave the dungeon. The connection between Taehyung and Joon-seoh is obvious, but this information could slip out of the hunter's hands. Large guilds always care about their own safety. Meanwhile, Taehyung suggested to Joon-seoh to make a contract. The man also didn't delay signing it and organized everything the next morning. Min-hee-soo prepared the documents. All the conditions corresponded to those announced in the dungeon, and so Joon-seoh signed the contract without hesitation. Back in the dungeon, Taehyung offered the main character unofficial support. He will provide Joon-seoh with everything he desires. In return, the guy has to perform some tasks. The main character has the right to refuse if he doesn't like something. But that doesn't matter, because the main goal is to create a connection between Joon-seoh and the mass murder guild. In the dungeon, the guildmaster failed to get an answer. Agents from the Hunters Association came for him, but the man hoped that the boy would not refuse. For him, the main character's skills are the most valuable. This also worked in Johnson's favor. He can cooperate with the guild without officially joining it. The guy presented a list of necessary items to Hisu's secretary, and the girl gave a gift to Jongseon from Taehyung. All those things on the list are not actually needed by the guy. He asked them for someone else. After that, Jongseon hurried to organize the gate register. The humble A-rank hunter Chia is supposed to come here. The selection of players will take place in about 2 years. Han Chia will be one of the chosen ones, and after numerous achievements, she will be called the Archer Goddess. But at this stage, the girl is very insecure, and this prevents her from developing. With great effort, Chia overcame her feelings and came to the center of the gate register. She wanted to apply to pass the D-rank training gate. Despite her high A rank, Chia has virtually no experience. After the mana rained down from the sky, the Hunters Association set out to measure its amount in humans. Later, according to these indicators, the awakened were divided into ranks. But this status is not fixed. The rank can be raised or lowered. It all depends on the achievements of the awakened one in the dungeons. The girl received a high rank, but since then she has not developed any skills. She has only had 2 attempts at the goal, but they both ended in failure. To maintain her rank, Chia must pass a test. However, the girl didn't even think about it. She was worried about having enough courage to clear at least the D-rank training gate. Chia's insecurity hindered not only her, but also all the team members. Therefore, the girl wanted to go to the gate alone so as not to set anyone up. But it turned out that this required permission, which could be obtained after a special assignment. Otherwise, the team must consist of at least 2 people. Chia is not the only one awakened without a partner. Such hunters are added to a special list from which a team is then formed. And so the girl didn't know until the last moment who she would be passing through the training gate with. The day of testing has come. Excitement filled Chia's thoughts. A little late, Jongseon arrived. The main character arranged everything so that he could go to the dungeon with Chia. Thanks to his memories, the boy knew that the girl would awaken her skills only after she became a player. By that time, Chia will have already dropped all the way to C rank. But Jongseon knows that it is possible to awaken the ability even earlier, and he is going to help the girl with this. The D-rank support and the future archer heroine set off into the dungeon. The monsters there turned out to be goblins. At first, Chia watched her opponents from the bushes, and then she dared and picked up the bow. But when the moment of the shot came, excitement gripped the girl again. Eventually, Chia let go of the arrow. She managed to injure one of the monsters. The girl's attack power far exceeds that of an A rank, but there are problems with her accuracy. Only 1 out of 3 arrows hits the target. The monsters were confused. Suddenly, one of them blew a horn, and in a moment the goblins surrounded the hunters. Chia was confused. She didn't know where to shoot. The monsters were approaching. To save the situation, the protagonist activated a spiritual weapon and stopped the goblin attack. He didn't want to take everything on himself, so he asked the girl to shoot in one direction. Thus, Chia cleared the way, and then the heroes began to flee. Fortunately, they managed to break away from the goblins, and although the monsters were no longer even visible, Chia still felt uneasy. It seemed to her that the danger was very close. Instead, Jongseon behaved too calmly. The girl had had more than enough adventures, so she wanted to leave the dungeon. But now that's impossible. A cluster of monsters is nearby, and they are actively looking for hunters. The heroes will have to wait until they disperse. Jongseon said it would take at least half a day, but that was not true. And within 30 minutes, the goblins will stop searching. The fact is that the main character is going to convince Chia to go into the cave with the boss, but it clearly won't be easy. In addition, the girl fell into despair again because of her next failure. She has already promised to pay compensation to Jongseon, but the guy didn't want to listen. Instead of compensation, the protagonist asked Chia for a favor. In this way, he managed to lure the girl into the cave. On the way, the guy reported that instead of the real boss, there was an elite monster at this gate. He is a rank below the regular boss, so you shouldn't be afraid of him. Jongseon made up a story about wanting to try to defeat the monster. None of the teams accepted him. But thanks to Chia, he has that opportunity. The girl felt a familiar pain. She wanted to help. This would be the best way to thank Jong-seong for saving us from the goblins. Suddenly, heavy footsteps were heard ahead. An elite monster has appeared, a goblin giant. Gathering courage, Chia stepped forward and prepared to attack. But the monster deflected her arrow with a mace. The girl only needs to hit once to win because the monster is D rank. But at the moment of the second attempt, Chia again succumbed to excitement. The elite monster rushed to attack. The girl froze in place with fear and Jongseon was forced to push her away. The monster struck. Chia didn't notice if the main character had time to dodge. A feeling of guilt completely filled the girl's mind. Images of the hunters from her previous team appeared before her. They all blamed the girl for the failure. The bad reputation spread quickly, and now the girl regretted not having abandoned this matter altogether. She didn't even try to escape when the goblin giant was about to attack her. Fortunately, Joon-seoh blocked the shot. Thanks to the skill World of the Grid, he kept the monster under control. And at the same time, Chia was telling me what to do. The girl suddenly noticed that her feelings were intensifying. She understood where to shoot. Just one arrow. The main thing is to hit. This time, Chia put all her strength into it and fired. Powerful energy literally tore apart the goblin giant. Joon-seoh managed to recreate all the conditions for activating the item, although it was not easy. He understood that the situation was quite unusual for Chia, but to awaken a girl, you need to awaken feelings. In addition, Chia realized that Joon-seoh had predicted recent events, and now she wanted to know what it all meant. But her body could not withstand the strain, and the girl lost consciousness. Joon-seoh had to carry Chia out of the cave. Making friends, it turns out, is very difficult in all senses of the word. Half an hour later, the girl woke up and apologized to the hero for everything she could. She was ashamed of her ingratitude. No matter how you say it, the guy saved her life twice. Suddenly, Joon-seoh asked Chia for a pendant. It was the same item the boy had given her before entering the cave. The stone changed color, so the girl really used it. The Perception Meteorite is a very rare item. It can only be obtained in the Fire Harpy dungeon of rank A, but the conditions for activation are very complicated. Feelings only become sharply heightened when the emotions of the object's owner are at their peak. In the situation with Chia, Joon-seoh provoked intense fear. Finding a meteorite of perception on the market is almost impossible, but Taehyung managed to get it in just 2 days. The protagonist awakened Chia with the help of an object. However, now she needs more practice to reach her starting level. And the first priority is to change the short bow to a long one. Chia was sincerely grateful for the advice and for the pendant. Then in the cave, she felt energy from him. Everything around seemed to stop, and the target appeared right on the monster. Then Chia felt like she was capable of anything. She was excited for the first time, and it's all thanks to Joon-seoh. The guy was delighted and offered to exchange numbers for further cooperation. It was as if he had read Chia's thoughts, which was exactly what she wanted to say. Suddenly, Joon-seoh received an urgent message from Taehyung. The guild leader asked for help, and the guy agreed. The item that Taehyung gave him was very useful, and so Joon-seoh wanted to thank him. The guild leader was currently going to meet with the president of the Hunters Association. Min Hee-soo was already waiting for the boss. Usually, an official document is sent for such meetings, but this time the guild head was summoned in person. This may indicate the emergence of an S-rank gate. However, Taehyung wasn't worried at all, as he had already secured Joon-seoh's support. Only Hee-soo found such confidence in D-rank support incomprehensible. She suspects that the guy might be more capable than he seems, but not enough to be worthy of the guild head. Although Taehyun's state of mind improved significantly after the Arachne dungeon, this is clearly related to Joon-seoh. The secretary decided to find out more about the main character herself. Taehyung and Hee-soo have already arrived at the meeting place, but the security guard warned that we had to wait for one more person. It didn't take long. A few minutes later, the same man arrived, but it turned out to be Shinhwa Guild head Kim Stan. This is the only person who annoys Taehyun incredibly, and Stan never missed an opportunity to play on the nerves of his opponent. Usually, a berserker is very easy to get emotional about, but Taehyung learned to ignore provocations, and he restrained Min Hee-soo in this. The head of the Mass Murder Guild insisted on starting a meeting with the president of the Hunters Association, but the guard didn't even have to report anything. The president himself already guessed that everyone was in place when he heard an argument between fierce rivals. The head of the association reported that an unidentified gate had recently appeared. It is very difficult to measure their level. This is usually done using a special device. The rank of the gate is equal to the rank of the monsters inside it. Intelligence data is also taken into account, but in this case it is impossible to measure rank. The association sent scouts, but none of them returned. It is unknown how long the gate curtain will last, but you can't leave everything as it is. There have already been cases when monsters have crawled out of the portal. This time it is necessary to prevent a catastrophe. The association sees no other way out than to send the top 3 best guilds for a cleanup. However, the third of them, Henmu, is currently on a business trip and will not be able to arrive for the assignment. The president of the association is ready to provide everything necessary to resolve this issue. 2 days are given for preparation. It doesn't matter who the guild leaders take to their teams because the main thing is the result. And it was a good condition because Taehyung would be able to take Joon-seoh. After the meeting, Stan was in a bad mood. He ordered his subjects to assemble a team of A ranks. Taehyun's smile haunted the man. The head of the Xinhua Guild felt that his opponent had a trump card up his sleeve, and it was incredibly annoying. On emotions, the guild leader ordered the hiring of Kang Yuran. He didn't care that the girl wasn't helping anyone right now. Stan wanted to assemble a better team than Taehan had, and he was ready to do anything for it. 2 days passed quickly. Taehyung's team included his deputy Mangun, the girl fighter Jae-hee, and Joon-seoh. The Xinhua Guild had to wait again, and Jae-hee didn't hold back on this dissatisfaction. However, Manghun was closely monitoring the girl's emotions. Although his educational measures were not enough for long and everything started again, at first glance it seems that there is no harmony between these two, but in battle they are very reliable. Taehyung took the opportunity to thank the protagonist for agreeing to help. But Joon-seoh had more than one reason to go to these gates. 5 days ago, the guy received a notification from the system about a hidden task. It is necessary to clear the dungeon with history and put an end to the abandoned world. The level of such tasks is quite high, but the rewards are worth it. Some hunters may even awaken new skills in such conditions, and it turned out to be the same dungeon that Taehyung had called Joon-seoh to. Soon, the Xinhua Guild team appeared. The smug Stan, as always, behaved provocatively. Mengun barely restrained Jae-hee. It's no secret that the Mass Murder Guild and Xinhua are at odds. Even the media is constantly arguing about which one of them is stronger. Suddenly, Stan turned his attention to the main character and started laughing. He guessed that Joon-seoh was the trump card. The guy didn't react, and Stan continued to crucify himself. But Kang Yuran, who came as part of the Xinhua team, didn't like it. She is the strongest elemental master in Korea, able to use all 6 elements. Jae-hee couldn't contain her surprise. In addition, the head of the Xinhua Guild is an S-rank magician. The team is quite powerful, even without taking into account the 2 other female fighters. However, this did not bother Taehyung and Joon-seoh at all. It was time to set out on a mission. The protagonist knew it wouldn't be easy. In the past life, the clearing of these gates failed. Of the 8 team members, only Taehyung survived. And it was only thanks to the encroachment skill that he managed to get out of there. After that, the gate disappeared. And with it, the 7 high-ranking awakened ones. There are no guarantees that the gate will be cleared this time, but the hunters set out on a mission. The dungeon world turned out to be a huge estate. As soon as all the team members entered the room, the door closed behind them. The path to the portal remained on the other side. Jae-hee and Mengun tried to force the door open, but to no avail. Even the head of the Xinhua Guild couldn't do anything. Meanwhile, doll monsters have arrived from the depths of the estate. Surprisingly, they fell apart with just one blow. Stan wanted to be first everywhere. Mindlessly waving his fists, he smashed all the dolls. But later, they began to revive. Only then did the Xinhua chairman activate his Iron Fist ability. Thus, he was able to crush the monsters again. The entire team, except for Kang Yuran and Joon-seoh, entered the battle. The girl wasn't going to waste her energy on such trifles. She went to this dungeon only because it was supposed to be home to the best hunters in Korea. But Joran was disappointed because she saw that they were all quite ordinary. Instead, the elementalist destroyed the insects that were nearby. Joon-seoh immediately realized that the girl was simply afraid of them, and he also noticed threads of infected mana next to each doll, and they reached for a wooden cross-shaped object on the ceiling. The guy didn't want to show off his skills, but it was necessary to destroy that object. The main character came up with a solution. He created a shield with the image of a spider right in front of the target, and Joran immediately directed her fiery attack there. The wooden object was destroyed, and with him all the dolls fell dead. The protagonist absorbed the infected mana that was emanating from that item. The same mechanism worked in each subsequent room. While the hunters were repelling the doll's attack, Joon-seoh found an object that fed them. In this way, the hunters managed to clear the entire first floor. Everyone was going to go to the second one. Suddenly, Stan felt a tingling sensation in his hand, and Joon-seoh noticed it too. But when the hunters began to climb the stairs, the boy decided to check one of the rooms. There he also noticed threads of infected mana and immediately absorbed it. On the second floor, the hunters were attacked. Strikes were coming from all sides, but the enemy was invisible. The team went on defense. Only now did Taehyung notice that Joon-seoh wasn't around. Meanwhile, in the room where the main character entered, a path to the basement opened. And within a second, a little girl came out of there. The presence of a child in such a dungeon stunned the main character. Instead, the girl was happy about the hunter's appearance, because she believed that he had come to save her. Suddenly, the little one turned sharply and headed back to the basement. Joon-seoh didn't understand anything, but it turned out that there was another person down there. The main character went down with the child, and I saw a girl in the basement who didn't look very healthy. As it turned out, this was one of the scouts of the Hunters Association. The girl immediately came to her senses when she heard that Joon-seoh and other hunters had arrived to help. She simply couldn't believe her luck. But the main character wanted to know what happened here. It turns out that Chelsea is one of the scouts who went to this dungeon. As soon as the girl entered the estate, dolls attacked her from all sides. The door slammed shut at that moment, blocking the way back to the portal. Chelsea noticed her colleagues among the dolls, but they were not themselves. Then the scout began to run away. Thus, she came across a basement where she met a girl named Beth. On the second floor, the situation was getting worse. But later, the hunters began to notice the silhouettes of the attackers. It became clear that the monsters used the hide skill and looked like humans. Suddenly, one of the attackers' ID fell out of his pocket. Tae-young immediately recognized the Hunters Association scout. The truth stunned everyone. Within seconds, the bodies of the attackers became completely visible. This effect will last for a few minutes before it returns again. Stan decided to take the chance and kill the attackers. He didn't even care that they were scouts who needed to be rescued. The Xinhua leader prepared to use his skills. But at the moment of impact, he was stopped by Jaehee's bullet. It flashed right in front of the man's face and left a scratch on his nose. Stan wasn't going to stand for this. Anyone who stood in his way would be destroyed. The scouts regained their ability and became invisible again. The attack was repeated, but now all of Stan's rage was directed at Jaehee. Tae-young intervened. He offered the Xinhua leader all the funding for passing through the gate in exchange for the lives of the scouts, and thus gained some time. Meanwhile, little Beth told Joon-seoh that all the dolls were wrapped in purple threads. To save the scouts, it is necessary to destroy the control mechanism attached to the body. If you simply break the threads, the dolls can explode. But Stan's patience was already at its limit. He gave Taehan 20 seconds to solve the scouting problem. Blocking invisible attacks is incredibly difficult. Only Jiran wasn't too bothered by all this and didn't hesitate to use her power for the good of the team. The seconds ticked away and the solution still did not appear. Stan was already preparing to use Iron Fist. But at the moment of impact, his ability was nullified. The tingling in my hand that had appeared recently has recurred. And then Joon-seoh appeared with Beth. He knew the way and was going to save the scouts. Tae-young breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the main character was okay. But at that moment, the hide skill was reset, and the scouts became invisible again. Only now they have chosen a new target, Jin-seon. Tae-young stood up for the boy. Unlike the rest, the protagonist could clearly see the silhouettes of the attackers because their bodies were wrapped in threads of mana. Then he made marks on the mechanism that turned the scouts into puppets. The hunters just have to hit the target. Tae-young immediately got to work, and it worked. The scouts stopped attacking and simply fainted. Who would have thought that everything would be so simple? The same story repeated itself with the other attacker. When the problem with the scouts was resolved, everyone turned their attention to the girl. Stan looked at Beth suspiciously. He couldn't believe that a simple girl had managed to get into a dungeon that was carefully guarded by the association. But Tae-young immediately came to her defense. An argument broke out between the men. The energy of both of them was burning and ready to explode. Soon the argument flared up between other members of both teams. Only then did Joon-seoh sense that something was wrong. His emotions were also raging. It was Beth's work. The girl was happy that she had managed to sow discord among the hunters, and the main character helped her a lot in this. To brainwash, you need to get close to the victim. Joon-seoh also fell under the influence of the child. When he first met Beth, the main character thought she was a monster. But later the boy began to trust the child. That's when he gave in. And now all the hunters are wrapped in threads of infected mana. But Joon-seoh is able to resist this. Thanks to the passive ability, the guy absorbed the monster's energy. Everyone quickly came to their senses. Then the main character announced that the enemy was this very little girl. The hunters were going to end this quickly. But then Beth called her parents. 2 large dolls appeared from the adjacent hall. Stan immediately rushed to the attack. And then another character entered the game. Beth's brother, Louise, took control of the Xinhua guild leader. The man turned into a puppet controlled by a little boy. Now Joon-seoh understood why he had felt the infected mana from Stan's hand back on the first floor. Tae-young was going to stop the new threat on his own and began attacking the Xinhua guild leader. But all the hunters took up the matter. It was just that they failed to get the man out of the controlled state. He has activated the impenetrable armor skill, which protects the owner when there is a threat to his life. Stan became invulnerable but also incapable of fighting for several hours. And so the hunters had time to get rid of the dolls. But the main monster here is Beth. It would be better for the hunters to focus all their efforts on destroying the girl, but ignoring the 2 dolls who are at the level of the boss of a difficult dungeon will not work. Therefore, Tae-young ordered the team to do their best and destroy the female doll. And he himself was going to destroy the male doll. While his comrades were busy fighting, Joon-seoh tried to understand why everything had happened this way. Beth has the ability to turn people into dolls. But for some reason, Stan's impenetrable armor doesn't allow him to control it. In addition, the girl very quickly turned the leader of Xinhua into a doll. If she could have done this from the very beginning, why did she delay? It was Beth who told them how to save the scouts, and then she just took it and exposed herself. Joon-seoh felt that something was wrong here. It was as if the girl had been forced to fight. Meanwhile, hunters attacked the doll from all sides. Taehyung was still amazed at the durability of Johnson's sword. Even during such a protracted battle, not a single crack appeared on the weapon. After wounding the female doll well, Jae-hee decided to use her enchanted bullet, and she aimed straight at the enemy's chest. This was the last attack. The doll fell to the ground, dead. Taehyung was also done with the male doll at this point. He was surprised that such strong opponents used only physical skills. Usually at this level, it is difficult to avoid psychic attacks. There is only one monster left, Beth. Taehyung quickly activated his ability and rushed into the attack. But before he hit, he noticed that the girl was smiling. A strange feeling did not leave the berserker, and the ease with which the main monster was killed was also alarming. The main character felt the same way, and in an instant, all the hunters froze in place in horror. They had never before encountered what had been reborn from the girl's body. A hidden boss has appeared, the vampire elder Elizabeth Bathory. Joon-seoh received a system notification. For defeating the new boss, the guy can receive demonic shackles of control. It turns out that the vampire was imprisoned in the girl's body by the same two large dolls. But thanks to the hunters, Elizabeth is now free. She feels alive again. The energy of the hidden monster was so strong that even Kang Yuran began to prepare for battle. It's obvious that Taehyung can't handle it alone this time. However, all these efforts only made the vampire laugh. Elizabeth decided to feed off the hunter's energy a little and used absorption magic. Everyone froze in place, unable to move. Kang Yuran also could not resist the oppressive power of the hidden boss. Only Taehyung, after making unrealistic efforts, managed to use the skill. However, his strength was not what was needed. Elizabeth stopped the sword with her hand and broke it. Then she taught the attacker a lesson with a retaliatory strike. The situation was critical. Only Joon-seoh did not despair. He noticed that Taehyung used less than half of his strength to strike, as in the fight against Arachne. Berserkers cannot use their skills at 100% all the time, as their bodies cannot withstand it. But the protagonist had absorbed enough infected mana and had a plan. He has already begun to create a new sword, only this time a demonic one. There was no point in hiding his skills from Taehyung now. His life was at stake. Joon-seoh finished the job in an instant and handed the Leviathan sword to the berserker. It was time for him to test his own strength to the fullest. But Taehyung felt a strange energy from the sword. He couldn't take it as easily as before. And the reason is that this sword was created using infected mana. After some effort, Taehyung finally picked up a new weapon. Elizabeth Bathory immediately felt a strong energy. The combination of infected mana and fire has an incredible effect. But the vampire still thought that wasn't enough. She activated the bloodbath magic. The skill covered a vast area and paralyzed all hunters. Now their bodies will slowly dissolve. Only Taehyung could resist the vampire's magic. Moreover, he even began to approach the enemy. Elizabeth once again resorted to her power and summoned the bloody hands. Giant limbs reached out towards Taehyung, but the man was no longer ruled by his own will, but by his weapons. Berserk charged in and destroyed the dungeon boss's magic. An incredible power, previously unknown, raged within him. And thanks to her, Taehyung managed to destroy Elizabeth Bathory. The system notified the protagonist about the completed task. Immediately after that, a box with a reward appeared. Joon-seoh hoped there would be something related to mana or regeneration, but he left the gift for later. The Leviathan sword began to disappear. In the future, the hero will not need to use a resource to materialize it because the sword is saved. Taehyung felt so exhausted that he couldn't even stand up. It's a wonder he remained conscious, unlike the rest of the team. Suddenly, Elizabeth came to her senses. Her condition was critical, as the system had already reported the successful clearing of the dungeon, and the main character decided to take the chance and clarify something. The boy noticed that the vampire rejoiced at the death of the giant dolls, despite the fact that they had protected her. But it turned out that these same dolls were used by Elizabeth as a valuable source of strength. Once upon a time, a vampire saved the owners of the estate from a monster. They, expressing gratitude, invited Elizabeth to their home. That's how she got caught. The vampire didn't even understand how she became part of this family. For a short time, she felt happy. But then she didn't notice at all how she was under control. Those people imprisoned Elizabeth in the body of a girl doll and sealed her abilities. Thus, they could use the infected vampire energy to protect themselves from monsters. For a long time, she could not move. But then a system appeared before Elizabeth. It was said there that a vampire would be able to leave the abandoned world. Her task is to get rid of hundreds of uninvited guests, that is, hunters. It turns out that Elizabeth is a player. In her world, a crack in the sky also appeared, and later the gate with the monsters. The owners of this estate took care to hide from the monsters. Using the vampire's infected mana, they created a barrier in the form of a desert. All this interested Joon-seoh very much. The guy wanted to know how to overcome the problem with the gate, but Elizabeth could not help, because while she was in the girl's body, her world was destroyed. The protagonist wanted to ask something else, but the vampire's body began to collapse. At this moment, the system announced that the reward could be used, the demonic shackles of control. Joon-seoh did just that. As soon as the boy put the object around Elizabeth's neck, the vampire began to recover. From now on, she will obey the main character and become his familiar. Joon-seoh was delighted that his familiar was a player. He could have kept the item and used it on another monster, but this case is special. Within a few seconds, the system registered the contract. The vampire immediately changed her account. Now Elizabeth will be a cat, but she can still talk. Joon-seoh continued his thoughts on imprisoning the vampire. He was once again haunted by the feeling that everything was not quite as it seemed. Even if the owners of the estate tried to protect themselves from monsters, is there any point in such a life? And the dolls don't look like those who fought for their own egos. Elizabeth stuck to her opinion. The human brain adapts to the body, and therefore the owners of the estate lost their own minds using someone else's infected mana. To put an end to the guesswork, Joon-seoh began looking for a clue among the doll fragments, and he succeeded. In a few seconds, the boy took out the crystal of the male doll's essence. This thing is the soul of a person who has turned into a doll and contains their memories. Joon-seoh showed the crystal to Elizabeth. The cat seemed to have been transported back in time. She saw the same family at the table. The woman from the memoirs said that she saw the same vision. In 5 years at most, their world will be destroyed by monsters. If you hide an estate with infected mana, it will eventually be lost between two worlds, and then death will be a matter of time. There is only one way out. Put your souls into dolls. Then the boy Louise noticed that Elizabeth was different. She was able to survive, and he wants to help her do it. It's only thanks to the vampire that their family is still alive. The boy was ready to protect Elizabeth even in the body of a doll. The family made a difficult decision. Everyone placed their essence crystals into the dolls. After hundreds of years, the consciousness of each of them will dissolve. But these people wanted to do everything they could to ensure that Beth lived until she was taken to another world. No one knew what lay ahead. Seeing the truth, the vampire could not hold back her tears. Joon-seoh spent 50 units of infected mana to restore Beth to her original form. This was enough for only 3 minutes. The main character asked the vampire to pull himself together and thank him for saving him. Although it wasn't easy, Beth took care of the souls of her family members. Joon-seoh managed to complete an additional task. He learned the truth about the vampire, and for this he received a reward, a magical treasure chest. The dungeon clearing was 100% complete. The wounded were immediately given aid at the gate. Beth the cat didn't really like the new world, but she was going to live a happy life here. After returning from the dungeon, Kang Yuran felt simply terrible. But another misfortune awaited her at home. Tommen, who kills hunters in dungeons, wanted to know the details of the purge. Although he didn't expect to hear much, because he knew that Jiran had lost consciousness during the battle. Only the girl managed to see that Taehyung killed the boss thanks to the weapon that support Joon-seoh gave him. Tommen's eyes lit up. He had been looking for an S-rank hunter for a long time, which is why he targeted Taehyung. Kang Yuran advised to deal with the support first, but Tommen didn't even want to think that the so-called trash could pose a threat. A weapon without someone who can use it is meaningless, and the boy was sure that he could destroy both of them. Several days have passed since then. Joon-seoh spent the entire time sleeping, but he still hasn't recovered. Beth's absorption skill had worn him down considerably. The guy wanted to ask the cat how to deal with the consequences of the skill, but it wasn't in the room. It looks like Beth is exploring a new world, but the main character didn't worry about it because he could summon a familiar at any moment. Meanwhile, Joon-seoh decided to look into the magical treasure chest he received in the dungeon. Any object can appear from there. Usually there is the thing that the player needs most, but they have their drawbacks. For example, a sword may fall out that is easy to attack with but impossible to defend with, or a shield that can withstand any blow but reflects an attack at a random target. Sometimes players manage to find a way to control these disadvantages, but usually blood was shed. Joon-seoh thinks he will drop an item that restores mana, or increases it to a certain level. After all, he believes that this is what he needs the most. Eventually, the protagonist gave up guessing and opened the chest. The subject selection for Shin Joon-seoh has begun. Within seconds, the boy received the Traitor's Greed ring. It allows you to use the skill Mana Leak. This function is proportional to the amount of positive attitude the target has towards the owner. Joon-seoh became seriously angry and threw the object. The skill itself is pretty good, but the condition about a positive attitude didn't appeal to the hero at all. At this moment, the cat returned. She reported that the head of the Manhwa Guild had arrived in Joon-seoh, but it wasn't very pleasant news. Stan, to put it mildly, did not like the area in which the main character lives, and the very thought that he was personally going to hire a support person caused an uncomfortable feeling. However, the Manhwa leader believed that Joon-seoh was worth it. Even without what Duran had said, he had felt a special power in the dungeon then. It was the main character who endowed Taehan with energy that was capable of destroying Stan's barrier. It's not for nothing that the head of the mass murder guild hired this guy, but Stan was going to win Johnson over to his side, and he sincerely believed that he would be able to do it. However, the main character was not interested in the purpose of the guild head's visit. The boy was alarmed that Stan now knew his home address. The man hoped to make a good impression with his appearance, but he only received displeasure. Besides, Joon-seoh wasn't going to chat, but left the house to renew his assistant's work permit. Stan was willing to pay the hero 3 times more than what Taehyung was offering, but Joon-seoh refused them both. The Manhwa guild leader was seething with rage. Kang Yuran also refused to cooperate, but now Stan will do everything to make these two regret their choice. Instead, Joon-seoh had already forgotten about the leader of Manhwa. Suddenly, a man walking towards him pushed him with his shoulder. The main character again felt how weak he was. Turning to apologize, the boy noticed familiar facial features. He thought that man was Dojin, but until now, Joon-seoh believed he was dead. Several days have passed. The hunting team had already gathered at the C-rank gate. Joon-seoh was also there as an assistant, and one of the members of this group, Dojin, knows him well. This guy is the brother of the leader of the Daven Guild, Moon To-yoon. That was Joon-seoh's first team. Dojin didn't understand why his brother was so eager to clear the D-rank gate. But the point was in the items that could be obtained there with the least effort. Toyin was eager to develop and knew that large guilds were also interested in such dungeons. But later, Dojin was informed that his brother had died. The guy couldn't believe that a B-rank hunter was killed by D-rank monsters. But the head of the maintenance team, Lee Dongju, reported that the dungeon was invaluable. After the investigation, it turned out that the level of danger of this is high. Toyin said he got a permit for the gate at an auction, and it was approved by the Hunters Association. But it turned out that he had been deceived. However, Dojin was even more stunned after learning that the support managed to survive. No one knows under what circumstances, but it doesn't look like simple luck at all. And so the boy was going to find out for himself how it happened. It's time to leave. Hunters aiming for a positive result entered the portal. Suddenly, another hunter began to approach the gate. It was Tommen. He said he was late and immediately presented permission to enter the dungeon. The scoundrel was believed and let go. This time his target is Dojin. He is the candidate for the title of player. Meanwhile, the team has already dealt with the monsters. Only the dungeon boss had a B rank instead of a C rank. The hunters barely managed to defeat him. The group leader thanked Dojin. He had no idea this guy was so talented. In fact, Dojin had no intention of revealing his true abilities, but a difficult situation forced it to be done. The guy didn't even take his usual gear. The situation instantly became critical. The team leader's weapon broke. 2 were injured. At this point, Joon-seoh offered his weapon, and then Dojin felt that the power of the attack had doubled. But why is such a talented support still a D rank when his skills are at least A rank? Dojin was now going to solve his main question. He showed his face to Joon-seoh and admitted that he was the brother of Moon To-yoon, the late leader of the Dawan Guild. The guy said bluntly that he wanted to know the truth about his brother's death, but the answer could not be heard. At that moment, Tommen attacked from behind. Dojin barely managed to block the blow. The enemy is very strong. All the hunters except for Jinsen and the rising star Dojin died. Tommen was amazed. He guessed that the main character was the same support that Kang Yuran was talking about. Tommen prepared to attack again, but this time Dojin decided to dodge rather than block the blows. Otherwise, after the third such attack, everything will end tragically. This time Tommen failed to impress anyone. He felt an oppressive force on him, but he didn't understand what it was. This was Beth's work. She bound the scoundrel with threads of infected mana. That system immediately informed the protagonist about the lack of resources to support Beth. All the infected mana he had accumulated in this dungeon was quickly depleted. There are 10 seconds left until the end of the familiar's summoning. The threads of infected mana began to dissolve. Tommen freed himself and immediately directed his attack at Beth, but the vampire used the skill Mist and avoided defeat. Tommen is just as berserk as Taehan, but they have a difference in levels and weapons. Beth began to disappear. At this moment, Dojin rushed into the attack, and he managed to deprive the scoundrel of his right hand. There was hope for victory. Tommen dropped his weapon. This gesture signifies submission, but the villain had a different intention. He instantly took out a teleportation ring from his pocket and activated it. Dojin hurried to strike another blow, but he didn't have time. There was no trace of Tommen left. Joon-seoh was even glad that the opponent used the item to escape rather than attack or recover. The hero himself felt on the edge, but he was ready to tell Dojin about what had happened to his older brother. When the heroes left the dungeon, they had to lie that the other team members had been killed by monsters. This made Dojin feel bad. But those who gave Tommen a pass are quite influential and skilled. Even the security guards couldn't recognize the deception. The same thing happened a year ago when the Daven Guild received permission for a D-rank gate. Everything was approved by the Hunters Association and put up for auction. The families of the deceased were also lied to then. After all, if someone decides to look for the culprits, they can bring trouble upon themselves. If the attacker turns out to be quite influential, then nothing will change after he is exposed. So it's better not to say anything to anyone for now. Dojin accepted this but didn't understand why Joon-seoh was hiding his skills. And the guy admitted that before his first dungeon, he was ashamed to even be called a D rank. And that's where everything changed. As Joon-seoh was hanging by a thread from death, his skill was awakened. Because of this, he became the only survivor then. It's hard to believe, but it's true. The main character promised to find the culprits and tell everyone the truth, and apologized for keeping quiet. But now Dojin is like Joon-seoh. He saw everything with his own eyes, but he is forced to lie. However, now the guy won't stop until he finds the culprits. And from now on, Dojin will cooperate with the main character for a common goal. Meanwhile, Tommen had already teleported to safety. He burned with the desire for revenge. But the priestess only laughed at that mumbling. She didn't understand why the executioner had such high hopes for Tommen. But since they were accomplices, she had to help. Although I would rather sacrifice him, the moray eel gave the boy her child. But he refused to eat the incomprehensible creature. And in general, Tommen doesn't trust the priestess. However, there was no choice. The boy overcame himself and swallowed the creature. Within a few seconds, the hand began to grow back. This is just the initial stage. Over time, the new limb will take on the appearance that best suits the owner. Tommen was haunted by thoughts of revenge. Now the image of the main character was deeply embedded in his head. Shortly after, a crowd of journalists gathered at the airport. They were all waiting for the return of the head of the Hengmu Guild, Wu Hein. She flew to the United Kingdom to solve a problem with a difficult dungeon level. As soon as the woman entered the room, she was immediately pelted with questions. But Secretary Min Wan took care of everything in an instant. On the way home, she reported the situation to Wu Hein. But the woman was only interested in the news about Tommen the Rider. The gate guard's testimony points to this person. Among those who survived were two. Wu Hein didn't understand how a B-rank hunter and a D-rank support managed to survive the Rider, and now I was going to meet each one in person. Their testimonies will help the woman understand whether they are accomplices or simply intimidated. After all, none of them said anything about Tommen. Joon-seoh spent the whole day searching for information about the Rider, and he discovered that he was not registered as a hunter. Without a doubt, Tommen is involved in the disappearances of people in the dungeons, and errors in gate ranks can also be the work of the organization behind it. Even that dungeon with Beth is no exception. Everyone who went there has the potential to become a player, and their death would affect the fate of the world. But killers work outside the dungeons as well, and this means that now it is dangerous everywhere. Suddenly, a phone call rang from an unknown number. It was Kang Yuran. She invited Joon-seoh to a talk at a local establishment. The guy came, but he was unhappy that his home phone number and address were now known to outsiders. Juran guessed that Stan also came to the main character with a proposal to cooperate, but she immediately assured him that she had called him to chat. Juran lost consciousness in the dungeon with the vampire, but she really wanted to know what happened then. How did Joon-seoh manage to defeat the boss? But the guy said that it was entirely Taehan's fault, and he was just creating weapons. Juran gave up trying to find out anything. Then Joon-seoh warned the girl about the danger. She is quite strong but does not belong to any guild, and therefore has no protection. The killers might target her. But the girl wasn't scared at all. Instead, she noted that Joon-seoh is an easier target, and offered her defense. Refusing, the protagonist decided to leave the premises. As soon as this happened, Kang Yuran called Tommen. She gave the executioner a chance for revenge. Returning home, the main character heard a familiar voice. The rider was already waiting for him, and he was amazed that the guy still dared to walk alone at night. Joon-seoh fell into a trap. The priestess created a barrier called the Dark Space. No one from the outside will know what is happening inside. It's like a virtual world that looks like reality. But Joon-seoh knows about this. He even expected Tommen to attack him today. As Duran said, the main character is the perfect target. Jong-seon's calmness irritated the writer. He struck in an instant. But the main character managed to block it with the sword he created. This blow was stronger than the one in the dungeon, but it still failed to hit the enemy. Jong-seon mentioned that this was his second fight where he didn't have to worry about anyone seeing his skills. Tommen still believed that the main character was just a support, incapable of anything on his own. And Jong-seon has already activated the skill World of the Grid. At this time, Woo-hain was passing by. Sensing the infected mana, she decided to check what was wrong, but there was nothing around that looked like a gate. Woo-hain belongs to the class of saints, and he is above average among supports. Such people can use both mana and divine power, and also feel infected mana. The secretary suggested reporting this to the Hunters Association, but the woman decided to check things out herself. Taking her staff, Woo-hain walked straight to the wall, and it turned out to be fake. The woman went through the barrier. Now not only did Min-won not see her, but she also did not feel her presence. And a fierce battle continued between the writer and Joon-seoh. The main character threw daggers at the enemy from everywhere. While he was fighting back, Johnson threw a grenade behind Tommen's back. The priestess Morena closely watched the battle. She noticed how accurately the main character uses his weapon. The swords themselves are quite ordinary, but Jong-seon uses them as if he has a lot of experience in battles. In addition, its range also includes firearms. It's surprising that such a talent has remained in the shadows until now. Even a battle-hardened writer has a hard time fighting this support. The grenade explosion did a good job of improving Tommen's health, but the main character has already prepared for the next attack. A swarm of swords hovered over the enemy. Just one movement of Jong-seon and all the weapons fell on the enemy, but the scoundrel survived. Now the priestess entered the game. She activated the transformation of the writer's hand. Tommen's body was filled with infected mana, and his new hand turned into a giant claw. Joon-seoh prepared for the attack. He released his sword, but it broke in two from Tommen's blow, and the cutting force continued its movement all the way to the main character. Fortunately, Jong-seon managed to put a shield in front of him. Now Morena was certain that the support could not survive with the help of creation skills alone, but the guy had a backup plan. Along with it was an item that Tae-young had given as a sign of the contract between them. This is Arachne's bloodstone. It is able to grant the user the rank of the one who dealt the last blow to Arachne, but the duration of this item is only 1 minute. After this, the user loses 99% of their stamina. Joon-seoh dared to take this step and swallowed the stone. The enemy was already approaching, but at the moment of impact, the main character held his weapon in front of him. He felt what it was like to be a fighting class. Without a second's delay, the boy moved on to the next round and activated Tekken's explosion ability. Moray was amazed. She guessed that the effect of the item was temporary. However, the priestess felt the infected mana from Jinson's weapon. An ordinary hunter cannot use it. And the executioner certainly did not endow the main character with such abilities. However, this is possible thanks to the mana absorption skill. After clearing the dungeon of Beth, Joon-seoh had no infected energy left, but Arachne's bloodstone itself contained mana, which the boy absorbed. Thus he managed to create a demonic weapon for himself, and it turned out to be the sword of Fragarach. Joon-seoh made the first attack, but Tommen managed to avoid defeat. The main character did not stop. He had little time. The writer skillfully repelled the enemy's blows, although it was not easy. The priestess noticed that something was wrong. Arachne's bloodstone grants the user rank and class but not combat experience. But Jong-seon uses his weapon as if he's been doing it for the 1000th time. In a past life, the protagonist was also not a fighting class. But the matter was in the weapons. Fragarach is different from Leviathan. The sword that Taehan used was focused on firepower, and Fragarach is filled with infected mana. Jong-seon felt that his consciousness and feelings were clear, but at the same time he felt that something else was moving his body. It was Fragarach who guided the boy. The main character developed an uncontrollable desire to chop, and he finally managed to break Tommen's resistance. At this moment, Jong-seon struck another blow. The writer could not do anything and fell to the ground. The duration of Arachne's bloodstone has expired. The protagonist felt exhausted and also fell to his knees, dropping his weapon. But that wasn't the end. Fighting a violent tremor in his body, Tommen stood up. Joon-seoh felt that the next blow could be fatal for the enemy. When the writer rushed to attack, the main character began to create weapons. But at that moment he noticed a bright glow. Divine power covered Tommen. This was the work of Woo-hain. She tied the scoundrel with her skill. Until now, the writer had been under the control of the priestess. But now he has returned to his senses. Not remembering what happened, Tommen began to scream, blaming everything on Moren. The priestess saw no other way out than to get rid of the troublesome writer, and that's why she created the guillotine. Woo Hain tried to stop Marina by using her power on her, but she just laughed. A protective barrier of divine energy appeared above the headless horseman and the priestess. It turns out that besides these two, there is someone else here. Now Tommen's body is completely subordinate to Moray, but she is not going to continue the fight, since the executioner did not ask for it. After using the teleportation item, both villains instantly disappeared, and Woo Hain just had time to see Joon-seoh faint. The main character regained consciousness in an unfamiliar place. It seemed to him that a week had passed since the last events, but now Joon-seoh felt cheerful. The only thing that worried him was the ropes on his arms. But he didn't have to think long about what the problem was. A minute later, Woo Hain appeared. It was she who helped Joon-seoh recover faster, for which the hero was very grateful. Only now the woman wanted to know how the guy was connected to those scoundrels, and she agreed to answer all of Joon-seoh's questions after that. The main character knew who his savior was. Woo Hain is an S-rank holiday. It's just that in his past life, the Henmu Guild wasn't as strong as it is now. Xinhua and the Mass Murder Guild were on the same level. There was another one, United Souls, but it was a step behind the first two. The hero's life is significantly different from what is in the memories. Nowadays, the Henmu Guild is indeed one of the three major guilds, and this only happened thanks to Woo Hain. She is the best support of the healing type. The woman initially received a C rank, but quickly advanced to S. In her past life, Woo Hain had only reached a B rank. Back then, this woman was weak and delicate, but now it is sharp as a blade. Joon-seoh kept thinking that Woo Hain might be in cahoots with the hunter-killers. However, for some reason, she saved the hero. The woman wanted to know how Joon-seoh knew about the writer, but the guy decided to ask a question too. He needed to determine whether he could trust this person. After all, Woo Hain did not warn the association about what had happened, but tied up the guy and interrogated him. In addition, there is a possibility that the killers planned everything. Perhaps they deliberately eliminated Tommen to gain the hero's trust and find out everything he knows. The writer said that no one could pass through the barrier, but Woo Hain managed to do it. Therefore, Joon-seoh asked the woman to prove that she was not an accomplice to the hunter-killers. The saint decided to tell about herself. She had a younger sister, Woo Jin. She is very talented. The girl was invited to various guilds, but she refused everyone because she wanted to be with her sister. Joon-seoh recognized the name. Woo Jin was the fiery lotus in his memories, a player who was called a heroine. One day, Gina returned home very excited. She held in her hands a permit to enter the dungeon, approved by the association. The girl believed that after that, she would be able to create her own guild with Hain. But it was a trap. That gate took the lives of all who entered the portal. Gina could have gotten out if it had been a regular dungeon, but it had a mistake in rank. And then the rider appeared. The villain struck first at Hain. The saint could not resist and fell straight off the cliff. And that was the last time she saw her sister alive. But miraculously, the woman did not die. After regaining consciousness, Woo Hain found her sister, but it was already too late. Tommen killed her. Since then, the saint promised herself that she would do everything to become stronger. She joined the Henmu Guild and honed her skills as hard as she could, and so she reached the position of chairman. But then in the dungeon, she was incredibly weak. When Haina was on the verge of death, she awakened a new ability, healing. And now, with any injury or even clinical death, it brings her back to life. Woo Hain has status and wealth, but she has still not been able to avenge her sister's death. Joon-seoh felt a familiar pain. He was also helpless when his comrades died, and so he decided that now there was no reason to suspect Woo Hain of anything. The guy shared his story and everything he knew, and now the woman also understood the hero's distrust and suspicions. Taking the opportunity, she suggested that Joon-seoh join the Hungmu Guild. But at that moment, Tae-hyung burst into the office. He wouldn't let that happen. The protagonist was surprised by the appearance of the head of the Mass Murder Guild, and he, in turn, demanded explanations. It turns out that Tae-hyung has known Hain since the training center. They were attached to the same group. Before becoming hunters, the awakened undergo mandatory training. It is there that future hunters learn the basics of their skills and how to manage mana. A few days before, Hain had begun searching for survivors of the dungeon with the horsemen. This is how she found out that Joon-seoh was collaborating with a mass murder guild. The woman asked Taehyun about the main character, and he lied for the first time, saying he didn't know anything about it. Hain realized that the berserker was very interested in this support. But when she accidentally came across Joon-seoh, she immediately informed Tae-hyung about it so that there would be no misunderstanding. Once, Woo Hain told Stan and Tae-hyung about the hunter-killers and asked for their cooperation, but no one believed her then. The woman reported that these same killers attacked Yongsong as well, and so she invited Taehyun to present all the evidence. The main character confirmed everything that was said. Berserk was somewhat stunned, but this time he believed it. Wu Hain has been trying to track down the writer for a long time. She managed to solve many cases of missing hunters, and she noticed that killers choose their targets where there is least attention. For example, attacks most often occur on people who are not part of any guild. But not all guilds are a guarantee of security. The more members they have, the weaker the relationship between them. And so, when a person disappears from such organizations, their leaders usually hide it. After all, the very fact of disappearance spoils the guild's reputation. On the other hand, no one touches small guilds with a strong leader. The team is close-knit and everyone takes care of their comrade, and therefore a disappearance in such a group will not go unnoticed. Even Stan, with his terrible temper, cares about the employees. And so Wu Hain insists that Joon-seoh join the Hyungmu Guild. Only Taehan was against it. He emphasized that the combat power of his hunters was much higher, and therefore it would be better if the main character joined the Mass Murder Guild. Wu Hain understood everything. But how would Taehyung explain hiring a D-rank support to his high-ranking colleagues? The main character decided to calm them both down. He is not going to join any of the guilds because he does not need protection. His strategy is to play the role of bait. Even the Henmu Guild, with its capabilities, was unable to catch the villains in 2 years. Therefore, it is better to collect more evidence and only then inform the whole world about the existence of the killers. And this is only possible when they are convinced of Junson's defenselessness and attack again. While the main character is under the attacker's sights, fewer other hunters will be harmed. In addition, 2 large guilds will be able to help in a critical situation. Meanwhile, the priestess arrived at the executioner to report on the state of affairs. She reported the situation with the rider and that Wu Hain had intervened in the fight. To prevent Tommen from giving away information, Morena got rid of him. For the next task, the boss ordered the priestess to take a hermit with her. He will replace Tommen. But the executioner still wanted to know how skilled the main character was. Despite the information from the association, the priestess would have given Joon-seoh an A rank, and she also reported that the guy knows how to use infected mana, and this greatly interested the executioner. Now he wanted to know the progress of the battle in every detail. A few days later, Dojin was standing in front of the Mass Murder Guild office waiting for Taehan. Today is an important day for him. On Junson's advice, the boy will join this guild. That way he will be safe. Besides, Dojin's talent is enough not to arouse suspicion, and being among strong hunters will also benefit him. It is much easier to develop in such an environment. Joon-seoh, in turn, stuck to his own plan. Although Wu Hain and Taehyung didn't like him at all, it is unknown what the attackers are planning, so the hero decided to continue acting like a simple support. It is obvious that the killers will initially observe and even follow the hero, but when they are sure that Joon-seoh is alone, they will attack again. At first, it will just be a test to force them to open up, and only when the main character copes with the problem himself will the enemy strike with full force. At this point, the allied guilds will have to make their move. Wu Hain gave Joon-seoh a chest item, just in case. The guy didn't just tell her about memories from his past life, but he still can't figure them out himself. And now the main character has to meet Han Chia at a local establishment. The girl arrived on time and she had changed a lot since their last meeting. The archer goddess that Joon-seoh had helped awaken now shone. The two became quite close and kept in touch. After clearing the training dungeon together, Han Chia began to stand out. She tirelessly cleared countless dungeons, never knowing fatigue. And she achieved an impressive result. The archer was noticed. Now Han Chia is among the top 10 ranged fighters, although he believes that all this is thanks to Joon-seoh. The girl did not come alone. With her was partner Kwon Sa-hyun. Typically, ranged fighters do not need a team and can operate independently, but for this you need to be smart and be able to find safe places. Han Chia is just learning, so for now it's better for her to act in tandem with a melee fighter. Dojin would be perfect for this role. Joon-seoh even wanted to introduce them, but there is a security issue. Instead, the girl coped with this task herself. Kwon Sa-hyun timidly extended his hand to the protagonist to shake. Han Chia followed Joon-seoh's advice and changed her bow. Now she works in tandem with Seiyin. But this boy is so timid that he doesn't even look the main character in the eye. Han Chia got down to business. She wants to join a guild. She hasn't decided which one yet. But first, the girl is going to get a certificate from the Islands of the Endless Sky. They are led by gates that have the peculiarity of not closing after clearing but rather developing. This phenomenon caused a lot of trouble for the Korean administration, but later they came up with a practical application. Dungeons began to be used to test the abilities of hunters, but there is a mandatory condition for certification, a team of 3 people. There should be a ranged fighter, a melee fighter, and a support. And so Han Chia turned to Joon-seoh for help. The main character thought for a moment. In the past, the archer heroine always worked alone. She was a cold and confident hunter. But the current Chia is ready for teamwork and even wants to join a guild. Joon-seoh agreed to the offer to go to the islands of the boundless sky. The day of testing has come. The guard Nona gave everyone bracelets with mana as a pass and a guarantee of safety. As long as the bracelets are on the hunters, she will be able to provide assistance if necessary. Nona has an A-rank support and the skills barrier and rescue. If the team decides that they can no longer take the exam, the guard will immediately save everyone. While Nona was announcing the rules, Joon-seoh turned his attention to Se-hyun's weapon. The hero had never seen such a sword before. It's time to leave. The hunters entered the portal and found themselves in the 12th location. In 5 minutes, the first wave of monsters will begin. With each subsequent wave, the difficulty will increase. The hunter's task is to destroy all monsters. It is known that there are 100 waves in this dungeon, but this is not accurate information. The record was set by Taehyung, Woo Hyein, and Jae-hee from the Mass Murder Guild. They defeated 73 waves of monsters. It turns out that everything is more difficult than Joon-seoh thought. Nona moved to the location from which she would observe the exam. The first wave has begun. The team prepared to fight the gremlins. But suddenly Joon-seoh felt an uncontrollable thirst for blood behind him, and this energy gathered around Se-hyun. In a past life, the main character had to experience something similar, but this happened after the players woke up. Among them were hunter-killers. A system window with a hidden task appeared before each such awakening. The assassins were subordinate to the secret guild Empty Fantasy. It is unknown who the head of this organization is or even what their goals are. Assassins have existed for quite a long time, destroying players in dungeons. The main character encountered them several times, and then he learned that assassins receive hidden assignments. But when Joon-seoh wanted to know what they were getting in return for this, the scoundrels simply exploded. This was their punishment for failure. This time, the main character is going to find out the truth. Joon-seoh didn't stop watching Se-hyun either. The 5th wave of monsters was already approaching, and the boy was destroying the monsters alone. Chia explained that Se-hyun doesn't like it when she interferes. He is a berserker and does not yet fully control his emotions during combat. But Joon-seoh believed that Se-hyun's fighting style indicated that his type was a killer. In addition, the guy completely ignores blind spots. But Chia helped with this. She instantly destroyed the monster behind her comrade. That's usually how they work. Se-hyun deals with the monsters, and Chia destroys those who fall into his partner's blind spot. The main character's mission in this dungeon is to follow Se-hyun and help him if necessary. The 6th wave has arrived, the direwolves. Then the lizard men arrived. The team successfully defeated the 8th wave, the skeletons, and the 9th, orcs. Joon-seoh felt that his mana might not last long, and the rest of the team put in a lot of effort. It's time for the 10th wave. And here the level of difficulty increased dramatically. 2 trolls appeared. Obviously something went wrong. Se-hyun began to dodge the blows, and Chia decided to distract one of the trolls to make the task easier for her friend. The girl shot the monster in the arm, but it was a waste of energy, because trolls have the ability to regenerate limbs. You need to aim for the head. Joon-seoh got to work. He immobilized one troll with chains, but suddenly another monster rushed to his aid. Trolls are usually guided by simple instincts. But something strange is happening here. Joon-seoh has prepared for an attack, but at that moment a guard appeared. She blocked the troll's attack, and then she reported that there was an error in the portal, which caused much stronger monsters to appear. Nona used teleportation to save Joon-seoh and Chia and moved them to the lobby. The heroes immediately heard a message from the security department of the Endless Sky Islands. Everyone was asked to leave the premises due to the appearance of new portals. Nona returned to the dungeon to save Se-hyun, and Chia and Joon-seoh hurried to leave the room. In fact, all these events were the result of the work of the priestess and hermit Urim. The guy used his rules skill and ordered the security officer to make an announcement. On the surveillance camera video, Marina saw a familiar support person. She didn't expect to meet him here. However, today the priestess is not here for Joon-seoh. She is here for a different purpose. Meanwhile, the watchman Nona was looking for Se-hyun. Inexplicably, the trolls disappeared somewhere, and Se-hyun stood motionless in front of the system window that suddenly appeared. He received a secret assignment, and only the boy saw it. The secretary immediately reported the emergency situation on the Tehenu Islands. The association is asking for help again. But the guild head cannot come alone because Joon-seoh asked not to appear there. However, Jae-hee and Manhwa were also not in the office to send them to help. Only 1 A-rank hunter remained, 5 B-rank hunters, and 3 C-rank hunters. This was not enough. Taehyung calmed down a bit when he heard that the Shinhwa Guild had also been asked for help. So I decided to wait for now. Meanwhile, the head of the maintenance squad, Dong-ju, was already rushing to the scene with his assistant, Soel. They are both awakened but not registered as hunters, and have never been to the dungeons. Just in case, Soel decided to take a staff with her. They didn't leave the stun gun behind either. A special force under the command of Li Shente has already arrived on the islands. He is also the leader of the Skeleton Guild. Don't you notice that none of the three major guilds had arrived yet? He sent everyone a request for help. Failures of various kinds occur quite often on the islands of the boundless sky. But this time, communication with the office was interrupted. In addition, representatives of the association also did not appear, or someone used their certification. Don't you felt that strange things were happening here? Not even all the hunters were able to evacuate. The head of the maintenance squad was going to wait a little longer, but Shente insisted on conducting reconnaissance. He was convinced that his guild's strength would be enough, and so he hurried to the task. Donju understood that Shente did not want to lose the award, which is why he acted in this way, but the feeling of anxiety did not leave the head of the maintenance squad. In addition, the Skeleton Guild relies on firearms, which are ineffective against monsters. Everything changes only after applying the skills of the group leader. He is the one who enchants weapons and puts mana into bullets to fight monsters. But Dongju has no trust in this character at all. In the past, Shente carried out illegal hunting activities, as well as illegal gate clearing, but there was no choice. Representatives of the maintenance team went on a reconnaissance mission with the hunters, but these people only hindered the priestess from carrying out her plan. She intended to get rid of them all, but the hermit Urim was not interested in murders and behaved quite relaxed. Fortunately for the boy, the priestess cannot kill him until the plan is carried out. Moray needs to buy a little more time to gather mana to close the gate, and she will force Urim to take part in this. The SWAT team, along with Dongju and Seoul, headed to the security department. The head of the maintenance squad filmed the entire event for reporting. The primary task is to rescue the guard, 5 members of the security office, and Seihen. The group opened the door to the department and everyone saw a horrific scene. The office members were dead. Shente tried to contact at least someone via walkie-talkie. A familiar voice answered, but the way of communicating was completely different. So the hunters guessed that they were not dealing with monsters. Shente ordered his subjects to protect Donju and Soel, but at that moment, the leader of the group was attacked from above. It was the demonic creature of the priestess. Fortunately, Shanta managed to block the blow. At this moment, 2 hunters from the Xinhua Guild arrived at the Endless Sky Islands. The last time the blonde heron was here was when she was undergoing certification, and then she overcame 47 waves. Standing next to the building were Han Chia and Joon-seoh. Xinhua hunters recognized the support from the Mass Murder Guild, just like their main character. Meanwhile, the conflict in the security department was escalating. The hunters began shooting at the demon, but he managed to escape, and then suddenly he attacked again and destroyed 2 hunters. A horseman appeared behind him, but he was immediately attacked by Shente. He used his elemental skill Glacier and imprisoned the headless enemy. Then the priestess appeared. She had already gathered enough mana. Shente asked Donya to escape and bring help, but the path of retreat was no longer available. Moray-il reduced the gate. At this point, Joon-seoh was trying to think of a reason why he could go back to the gate. He felt that something serious was happening there. The guy did not receive any tasks from the system, as happens with a rank error. However, convincing the Xinhua hunters to go together was not so easy. Fortunately, Han Chia helped. She wanted to save Sahen. For this reason alone, Haran agreed to go together. Another hunter, Dan, in that case also gave his consent. Suddenly, one of the local workers informed the hunters that the gate was getting smaller. At this point, the priestess began cleaning her new home. The demonic creature rushed at the hunters. Shente tried to stop the enemy with an axe, but we also had to use firearms. The demon fled, then attacked again from above. And this time, Shente used the elemental charm Fire. This stopped the demon for a while. There was hope that the gate would regain its original appearance. After all, the creature that caused their reduction has lost consciousness. And so it happened. For a moment, the portal grew larger, and the Xinhua hunters, along with Joon-seoh and Chia, did not miss this chance. Only Moray didn't like the main character's return at all. The priestess attacked immediately, but Joon-seoh had time to react and hit back. Now Moray was in his sights. The guy was going to find out what the scoundrel was up to, but at that moment some force held his hand back. A hermit appeared. Although he was very worried that someone would recognize him, Urim used the rules skill. In this way, he can force the target to obey the stated rules. The only downside is that the skill automatically selects a target from among those in the user's field of view, and it worked on Dan from the Xinhua Guild. When the guard with Joon-seoh and Chia left the dungeon, the trolls left too. After that, an unknown gate immediately appeared, and behind them is the system's message about the hidden task, empty fantasy. Seihen thought it was some kind of illusion. The essence of the task is to kill the guard. By this time, Nona had already returned, but almost immediately the priestess appeared. Without further ado, the moray eel attacked the hunters, but the guard managed to create a barrier. Then Nona instantly activated the rescue skill, and by the time of the priestess's next attack, Sahen and Nona had already managed to teleport. Both of them ended up in the security department of the Endless Sky Islands. But there too, a rider was waiting for them. He attacked from behind and stabbed Nona, and immediately rushed at Sahen. But at this moment, the guard used the redemption skill. It creates a barrier around the designated target and moves it to the safest location. Nona knows almost all registered hunters, but she had definitely never seen Marina before. Therefore, the watchman asked Sayen to report to the association about the hunter who was killing people. As soon as the teleportation was complete, the priestess appeared again. Marina admitted that she was just looking for a base, and the islands of the endless sky are perfect for this. However, the watchman was not so lucky. The priestess needs to feed her demon child with her wonderful skills, and that's why Marina killed Nona. Sahin was already at the watchman's house by this time. The system notification appeared again, only now the message was about the failure of the task. Then the boy received a powerful punch. This was done by an unknown creature resembling a human who appeared out of nowhere. Then the system informed me that I would have to pay with my life for the next failure. 2 hours have passed since then. A team of hunters fought off attacks from Dan, led by a hermit. During this time, the priestess managed to slip out of sight. The leader of the Special Forces unit, Skeletons, helped resolve the situation. He chained a dazed Xinhua guild hunter to an ice prison. Moray was simply furious with the problems created by the support. She didn't understand at all why Joon-seoh suddenly returned, but now she was ready to spend all the gates she had saved for the trials to get rid of him. At this point, many portals began to appear. This phenomenon surprised everyone. But what worried Joon-seoh more was that they were oozing infected mana, so all the gates with an error in rank are the work of these scumbags. Urim was worried that the priestess had decided to use all her gates. He thought the executioner wouldn't like it. But in this way, Marina is going to conquer the islands of the endless sky, and this compensates for all losses. The priestess felt confident, as there was still almost a year left before the players would awaken. But suddenly a system appeared, reporting an error in the multiverse. In this regard, the awakening of the players will begin right now. Marina is also a player. Systems also appeared before hunters. Joon-seoh was stunned. According to his recollections, everything was not supposed to happen this way, and not now. After congratulating everyone on being awarded the title of player, everyone received a task. Hunters need to destroy 10 waves of monsters that have already emerged from the gate. Haran, like most, didn't understand what it all meant. But the monsters were coming. The blonde from the Xinhua Guild was the first to act. She used the giant's shield and activated magnification. Thus a wall was formed. The main character took on the task of helping to build a defense line. He created many shields and also built a wall out of them. Only a narrow passage remained between the shields. Everyone was preparing for battle. Haran asked the skeleton leader to bring her comrade, imprisoned in the ice, back to consciousness. The priestess and Urim watched these events closely. The guy was amazed by the unusual ability to create support. Moray wanted to unleash all the monsters on the opponents at once to deal with them faster. But after the system was activated, it was too late. Moray's demons still managed to open the portals, but now she cannot control them. The hermit suggested letting the hunters go, as their goal was the islands. Meanwhile, Han Chia got to work. She used the skill Meteorite Attack. The girl managed to destroy several monsters with one blow. Dongju and Seoul were impressed by the organization of the hunters' work, who were working together for the first time. After a while, Han Chia began to feel exhausted. She didn't use her mana very rationally in the fight against trolls while passing the certification. But Haran came to the archer's aid. The blonde ran out behind the defense line towards the monsters, clapping her hands. At that very moment, the sound began to grow louder. The girl performed the blow. Haran's ability, Wave Shock, allows you to impose sound waves and hit the target. All the monsters within a radius of 10 meters were scattered in different directions. Han Chia was amazed. The hunter's forces are not an infinite resource, and therefore even Donju prepared for defense. The weapon was given to him by the leader of the Skeleton Special Forces unit. The main character noticed that Chia was completely exhausted and suggested that she rest. That girl was worried about her partner Sahin and wanted to go in search of him. Joon-seoh was convinced that the boy was safe because a guard had gone to get him. But then Donju reported that Nona was dead. But in the security department, apart from the bodies of the employees, there was no one else. And that's why Sayin is alive. Chia calmed down. But everything changed again the moment the hunters noticed that Seoul had disappeared. At this time, the cat Beth was walking on the roofs of houses. Her attention was drawn to an argument between two men. One of them threatened to retaliate for not repaying the debt. But suddenly, the cat noticed that a boy was heading towards these men, and I decided to intervene because I couldn't just watch when the child was in danger. Meanwhile, the hunters tried to figure out where Seoul had gone. Noticing the reduced portal to exit the islands, Shente remembered that the demon could make its way through them. He lost his vigilance and that creature kidnapped Soel. Han Chia insisted on going in search of Sahen. Joon-seoh tried to convince the girl that her partner was probably no longer here. From memories from his past life, the boy knew that the guard had the ability to teleport, but he couldn't tell Chia about it like that. And so the girl didn't understand why the main character was so easygoing about someone else's life. The guy tried to explain that because of the reduced gate, they were stuck on the islands. Every minute is important because it will only get worse. Hunters need to defeat all waves whether they want to or not. Besides, it is unknown what will happen in the last wave. Chia understood the protagonist's anxieties, but she couldn't help but feel sad. Suddenly, at this moment, memories from the past appeared before Joon-seoh. Chia, who was already an archer heroine at that time, said something similar. The skeleton leader Shente intervened in the argument. He insisted on saving Soel, and at that moment the exit gate widened. Urim reported that to save Soel, support must enter the goal. Half an hour before, the hermit deleted the video on the hostage's phone. The priestess wanted to kill Soel, but the girl kept begging me tearfully not to do it, and Urim suggested using it. And so the plan to lure the main character emerged. In fact, the hermit also wanted to clarify something with Joon-seoh. All the hunters understood very well that this was a trap, but the main character decided to enter the gate. Before that, he created 2 swords. Then he asked Shente to throw them into the portal a minute after he entered, and used plata. Meanwhile, Haran single-handedly held back hundreds of monsters. This continued until the archer monsters appeared. At this point, Joon-seoh had already entered the portal. The priestess was very happy about this, and she warned that for one wrong move, Soel would pay with her life. Urim activated the rules skill, and he ordered the main character to tell everything he knew. At this moment, Hunter Dan of the Xinhua Guild freed himself from his action. Ever since Joon-seoh left the islands, a strange feeling had haunted him, as if he had missed something. And then the main character remembered. In a past life, he saw Urim next to Han Chia. But how did it happen that now the hermit is helping Moray-eel? At this moment, Shente fulfilled the request. 2 powerful swords flew past the priestess and Urim. This prevented the hermit from completing the rules. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Joon-seoh replenished his mana reserves with the help of a potion. The priestess managed to avoid damage from the swords by activating Protective Barrier. When all the main character's attention was focused on Moray-eel, a demon appeared from the portal. He attacked Joon-seoh, but the guy managed to create a shield and defend himself. The priestess attacked again, and on the other side, a demon was reaching out to the hero with its claws. At the last moment, the main character used his sword and cut off the hands of the otherworldly creature. But a giant hammer was already flying at the boy from above. At this time on the islands, the skeleton leader was already completing the release of Dan from the ice. The 5th wave of monsters was beginning. Trolls and gnoll mages appeared. Fortunately, Chia already knew how to deal with them. With the first shot, the girl destroyed one monster, but the next one managed to dodge. Then he grabbed the bones and threw them at the hunters. Chia was injured. No one understood why the creatures suddenly became so intelligent, but the whole reason was their leader. The troll leader cast Invincible Scream, but he was immediately cut open by a giant hammer. The weapon flew straight out of the gate where Joon-seoh entered. It was the priestess's hammer, which the main character dodged, and another one of these now hung above the support, but he failed to reach his goal. Joon-seoh stopped the weapon with his shield. He had to drink the mana potion again. The priestess didn't understand what was going on. Why does the main character show all his skills but not even try to attack? Suddenly, Joon-seoh remembered the chest of items that Wu Hain had given him. It had twin rings in it. They allow users to communicate telepathically and are able to transport one person to another. Then Joon-seoh wanted to give up the rings because he didn't want to be caught by the villains. But Wu Hain insisted on taking the items because they would be very helpful in an emergency. The main character gave the second ring to Tehen, and now he could call on the Berserker for help. Together, they will be able to catch Moray-eel. However, this would not be enough. Joon-seoh decided to continue with his plan. The hermit hid for that moment and sat quietly so as not to give himself away. And the priestess, although she didn't think she would have to use it, transformed the rider again. The headless creature escaped from its ice prison and immediately attacked Dan from the Xinhua Guild. And then it began to increase dramatically in size and appeared before the rest of the hunters on the islands. Morena was sure that now the support team would not be able to handle everything. She's ready to use any methods to win. But she didn't notice at all when the main character activated the world of the grid, and in a matter of seconds he created a multitude of spears over the priestess and her demon. A few days before these events, the executioner ordered the priestess to find the gate to their base. This task is a priority because he has little time. Thoughts about the support's ability to use infected mana did not leave the executioner. However, this will be known after the system is activated. During his stay on the islands, Joon-seoh gained many memories. However, the boy noticed that Han-chia and Yurim had the same skills, but their personalities had changed a lot. Even the priestess's skills, hammer and defensive barrier, also reminded someone of the hero. Joon-seoh understood one thing. He needed to kill Morena. Meanwhile, the priestess was already preparing to attack, but her staff stopped obeying. This is how the main character's connection skill worked. It allows you to control the weapon of the selected target. But if this happens against the owner's will, the mana consumption increases significantly. Morena ordered the demon to kill the hostage soul. But at the moment of the attack, the creature's arm was pierced by Jinson's spear. Then a mass of weapons rained down on the demon and completely destroyed it. Following this, the main character attacked the priestess. But the boy was repelled by the power of her skill. The moray eel woke up and began to shine. She didn't mean to do this and didn't understand how it happened. At this moment, the rider arrived. But he rushed towards the priestess, not at Joon-seoh. Another gate opened next to moray eel. From there, infected mana appeared and pierced the rider with a powerful stream. Then the executioner emerged from the portal. He guessed that Joon-seoh was the same support that Morena was talking about. The protagonist was stunned by the amount of mana the executioner had infected, and the rider continued to attack him. The fact is that the headless creature is not yet complete and chooses the strongest opponent for itself. Morena felt guilty about this and promised to correct the shortcomings. Now the executioner decided to take matters into his own hands. The hunters on the islands were already completely exhausted. Han-chia and Haran were injured. Dan still hasn't regained consciousness after the rider's unexpected blow. Now only Dongju held back the monsters with firearms. The bullets enchanted by the skeleton leader explode as soon as they hit their target. Meanwhile, Shente himself arrived at the protagonist's place. He wanted to save Soul, and the girl, fortunately, was alive. The executioner began to confidently approach the heroes. The skeleton leader pointed his gun at the enemy, but he didn't stop. The executioner used infected mana and without any unnecessary movements got rid of the noisy hunter. Joon-seoh was stunned, having never seen anything like this before. The technique used by the stranger interested the main character. It seemed that Joon-seoh was not at all worried about the death of the skeleton leader, but everything was not like that. He just couldn't do anything. The executioner expected the boy to attack him to avenge the death of his comrade. But Joon-seoh did not do this, because he understood that he could not cope with such a strong opponent. Even if you call Taehen, the situation will not change. The main character was interested in the executioner, and he wanted to know how Joon-seoh knew about the infected mana. Meanwhile, the hunters continued to destroy the monsters, but the noise they made annoyed the executioner. So the villain decided to get rid of them all. In a second, the executioner created sharp blades from infected mana and threw them towards the hunters. Joon-seoh barely had time to shout for everyone to get down on the ground. Han-chia at the last moment knocked Dongju off his feet, who did not hear the main character's warning. All the monsters were destroyed by the cutting force. Fortunately, the hunters managed to avoid the blow. Joon-seoh drank the third jar of mana restoration potion. Now its effectiveness will decrease and symptoms of addiction will appear. Suddenly, infected mana began to leak from all the portals, and in an instant the gate was destroyed. Han-chia decided to go to help the main character. Due to her injuries, she will not be able to shoot a bow, so the girl brought a firearm with her. The phenomenon of infected mana leaking from the portals was caused by the executioner. He was the one who pulled the energy out of the gate and forced it to close. Now that the system has been activated, these portals have no meaning to him. The executioner was waiting for Joon-seoh's answer, but the boy didn't know what to say. All his thoughts were focused on finding a way to survive. It's clear that as long as the villain is interested in the main character, everything will be fine with him. But the situation could change in an instant, and there would be nothing Joon-seoh could do. Even without an answer, the executioner sensed that the support did indeed have infected mana. Oh, so he got memories too. The fact is that only those who have memories can use infected mana. The executioner's goal is to prevent the end of the world, and to do this, he is looking for comrades like Joon-seoh. But something was worrying the main character. He didn't like the villain's methods. Suddenly, the priestess warned of danger. She noticed Han-chia approaching, aiming her weapon at the executioner. Joon-seoh did not want to engage in battle with a stronger enemy, But he could not allow Chia to die. The executioner activated the infected mana and was about to get rid of the new obstacle. From the remnants of mana, Joon-seoh created a dagger and rushed at the enemy to hinder him, but it was too slow. The executioner punched the supporter, and then he noticed that Joon-seoh was completely undeveloped physically. Until now, the main character has only used skills, but this way the guy will quickly reach his limit. While the system is active, there are many ways to get stronger, so there's no time to waste. At that moment, the infected mana began to head towards one of the gates that had not yet collapsed. The executioner realized it was a mistake, but he didn't expect it to go this far. The villain has opened a new portal, and before disappearing, he said his name was Les. The executioner still didn't know whether Joon-seoh would become his friend or enemy, but he was ready to wait for the answer. Almost immediately after that, a system window appeared with a message about the last wave. The task is to defeat the boss, but Joon-seoh had no mana left. He barely created a dagger to stop Les from killing Chia. But how can the hunters defeat the boss now? The monster surprised the heroes a bit. It was a small bird. Joon-seoh had never seen a monster like this. Chia decided to try to deal with him. She was going to fight with firearms. Given the boss's appearance, the protagonist assumed that he was using infected mana, and that's why he thought Chia was in danger. But Joon-seoh was unable to help or even warn the girl. Blood gushed from the boy's mouth. A side effect appeared after excessive use of the mana potion, but suddenly the monster quickly headed towards the main character. He was looking for the infected mana and could feel it from Joon-seoh. The creature said that the boy had borrowed its energy and now had to return it. The bird had a lot of it and knows for sure that its infected mana was used here. Only now did the main character realize that it was Les who took away the energy the monster was talking about, but it was difficult to explain this to the beast. Fortunately, Haran arrived and dealt the bird a fatal blow. Surprisingly, it was very easy. At that very second, a system window appeared in front of the hunters with a notification about the end of the quest. Heroes will receive their rewards. Joon-seoh was only worried about those who were unconscious. The reward for completing the task is a way out of the islands of the endless sky. Everyone returned except the dead. The people around were confused that a system had appeared in front of them. Unlike memories, this time the system appeared in everyone. No one understood what it all meant except Joon-seoh, but he was silent. Now the main character was going to change the plan. And the first thing he needs to do is improve his physical capabilities, as Les advised. After the system appeared, some people began to claim that the end of the world would soon come, but there were few of them. A few minutes before the hunters returned, the rift in the sky reacted weakly. During the investigation, it turned out that the Skeleton Guild was engaged in illegal activities. Due to Shente's death, the guild was disbanded, and all its members ended their activities as hunters. The association found Seihen in the house of the Nona Island's keeper. He told about an unregistered female hunter who killed people, and now the association is trying to determine its location. Soel regained consciousness in the hospital. Despite everything that happened, the girl was going to continue working. She wants to find out who is covering for the people who entered the islands on behalf of the Hunters Association. And Soul's enthusiasm was just off the charts. What can't be said about Donya? Shortly after these events, a portal appeared in one of the deserted alleys, and a goblin emerged from it. He immediately noticed a little boy walking nearby, and he was going to feast on the child. Near this alley was another unusual gate. The blonde sun just emerged from them, but a red system immediately appeared in front of the guy with the task activation. At that moment, Sun's attention was drawn to the cry of a child. It was the same boy who was attacked by the goblin. Fortunately, the blonde managed to neutralize the monster. Meanwhile, Joon-seoh was suffering after overusing the mana potion. The cat Beth was surprised how the guy managed to survive after something like that. In some way, Joon-seoh was grateful to Les for not killing them all. The main character carried out part of the plan. He showed his skills to his opponents and thereby focused their attention on himself. He also learned about Les. And Joon-seoh didn't worry about what the other hunters saw because he used the contract. This feature appeared when the system was activated. Previously, he could only use fee. But with awakened Class A and above, it doesn't work. However, contract is a different matter. Its conditions cannot be violated while the system is running. And judging by the fact that during the investigation, Joon-seoh was practically not mentioned, the skill works perfectly. Thanks to Taehan, the main character defined the limits of his actions. With the activation of the system, all players received rewards according to their class. Archers, improved sight, mages, the ability to have a familiar, etc. The main character can now use the communication skill, but Joon-seoh's life is completely different from what is in his memories. The system has opened up to all awakened ones, not just the players. Now they can start developing their skills. Beth suggested that the main character's memories might just be an illusion, But the boy knew that wasn't true. He heard it well when Les said too. So Jong-seon is not the only one who received them. The guy remembered that he had some matters to resolve and didn't hesitate. Along the way, the main character thought about Kang Yurim. In his memories, this guy acted together with the hero, but now for some unknown reason he is helping Les. Jong-seon felt that the hermit also had memories, but at the moment he had more pressing matters to attend to. The guy called Taehan and suggested meeting. At this point, the boy, saved from the goblin, thanked Sona and went home. But suddenly, a black car drove by and took the little boy. But this time, the blonde son was in no hurry to save the child. Jong-sung and Tae-young met at a local restaurant. The main character immediately told about Les and his extraordinary strength. The guy thinks the executioner isn't awake at all. However, his ability to use infected mana is simply amazing. In addition, the boy's thoughts about the priestess did not leave him. He still couldn't remember who she was. And in the memories, apart from Urena's skills, there was nothing else. Jong-seon was still pondering how much he could tell Tae-young. The fact that the main character did not share everything with everyone was long understood by the head of the Hengmu Guild, Woo Hein. The woman felt the infected mana from Johnson when she saved him from Tommen the Rider. It was the same energy that the priestess used. So Woo Hein asked Tae-young to try to learn more from the main character. But Jong-seon himself was going to tell everyone about it. He just didn't know if the head of the mass murder guild would believe him. But there was only one way to check. Jong-seon announced that a deity would descend to Earth and then the end of the world would come. The system has the characteristics of all players, and Yoon Tae-hyung has them quite high. Awakening rank is S, class is Berserker, style is Melee Fighter, attack and strength are at the highest level. The end of the world came as unexpectedly as the first awakening. A system with a task appeared before the players, the final quest. Immediately after this, a crack in the sky opened and a deity appeared who had to be defeated. Then Jong-seon received a personal quest to find a way to save the world. The feathers of the deity's wings fell from the sky, and it killed everyone it touched. For 7 whole days, the heroes tried to find a way to kill the creature. But exactly 1 week later, the world met its end. Tae-hyung listened carefully to the main character's story, but then he decided to take the boy to the hospital. Miraculously, Jong-seon managed to fend off the berserker. The protagonist continued the story. In the last minutes of his life, he realized how it would be possible to defeat a deity. But then an unknown creature resembling a mannequin appeared, the performer. It was he who killed all the heroes who were the key to saving this world. If Jong-seon had understood this earlier, he could have changed the fate of the world. But then it ended. The main character believes that there is also a deity behind the mannequin that is chasing the hunters. But Jong-seon doesn't remember the way to defeat the enemy. Before that tragic time, there were many heroes on Earth. But the boy only remembers a few faces. It seems as if someone intentionally erased part of the hero's memory. It was hard for Taehan to believe everything, but he is ready to continue collaborating with Jong-seon, although he still had a desire to recruit the boy into his guild. Tae-hyung asked to trust him and promised that he would also trust the hero. Then Jong-seon gave the berserker a book of skills he had acquired on the islands. She has an S rank and costs a lot of money. This book allows you to learn a new skill, but after the first application it immediately disappears. The main character wants Tae-hyung to become stronger. Instead, Jong-seon had a request. He needs to get the solvent for the magic stones. Tae-hyung readily agreed to help, but it turned out that the hero needed as much as 6,000 liters. Then Jong-seon began to name many more high-end magical ingredients, but among them were some that Tae-hyung had never even heard of. The thing is, the guy is trying to find items related to mana, and as quickly as possible, and the Mass Murder Guild has one. Secretary Tahena brought a spirit core. It is purified by the holy power of Wu Hein and has only pure essence. This item was obtained from an S-rank dungeon, but the secretary didn't want to give it to Jong-seon, and Tae-hyung didn't mind. The guild only took care of the delivery of the item, as it requires special treatment. Johnson also told the berserker about everything that happened on the islands of the endless sky. 2 days later, the main character arrived at his mother's house. The woman is disabled. When the mana fell from heaven, not everyone received the skill. There were people whose bodies didn't accept it at all. Later, this was called a disorder of mana perception. Some died immediately, while others suffered from various complications. Jong-seon asked Tae-hyung to deliver all the items to his mother's house. The guild secretary took on the matter herself. Thanks to the skill Discover Hidden Space, the woman had no difficulty in bringing the items. And now the main character has a chance to use all the magic stones he has been collecting all year. The case with the islands of the boundless sky was quite complicated, so the investigation took a long time. The head of the Manhwa Guild and the president of the Hunters Association also tried to clarify all the details of the events. Despite the fact that Haran filed a report, she was still summoned to see her boss, Stan. The head of the Dongju maintenance squad also reported to the president of the Hunters Association. Both claimed that there was a monster in the dungeon that could create portals. An awakened boss has also appeared, who can use infected mana. They were seen by Han Chia, Zhang Xian, and the late Li Shente. However, Donju was unable to see the enemy's face as he was busy fighting the monsters. For the same reason, Haran did not see the main villain. In fact, Dongju and Zhang Xian signed a non-disclosure agreement. The head of the maintenance squad has long suspected that the main character is not an ordinary person, and only now did he remember that he had already dealt with him a year ago when the Davin Guild was destroyed. Zhang Xian decided to tell Dongju about his memories, but before that I signed another contract with him. The main character did the same thing with Haran. The girl found it hard to believe everything that Zhang Xian told her, but the main character wasn't too concerned about that. He also gave the hunter a personal quest to improve her skills. As a reward for defeating the Banshee of Despair, Haran will receive an item. Based on information from his memories, Zhang Xian knows that he can help the hunter improve her level. Rereading Haran's report, Stan noticed that she had not lost consciousness and had received her full reward. The girl already thought that the boss was going to take the skill book away from her, but the head of the Xinhua Guild did not do this, because Haran deserved the award. However, after recovering, the hunter will have to perform tasks with insects, which she hates. Stan felt that Haran was hiding something, so he decided to conduct his own investigation. His secretary, So-hee, who is a B-level mage druid class, immediately called a car. Right now, these two will go to one of the former members of the Skeletons Guild. The president of the Hunters Association also believes that Dongju did not say everything, and so he reported this to the leader of the Awakened Response Team, an A-rank mage, Park Jong. He suggested setting up espionage on Dongju and interrogating Zhang Xian and Han Chia himself. The president agreed. Only the cat Beth was bored at this time. The last time she warmed up was when she saved a random boy on the street from two scoundrels. But suddenly, Beth received a system notification. Hidden quest. The task is to find a gathering place for strange people that the cat has met before and check it out. The reward for performance is the right to autonomous action. This is an item that allows a familiar to act freely, without obeying its owner for 5 minutes. A signpost even appeared above Beth, and the cat went searching to relieve its boredom. Meanwhile, Blonde Sun and his partner Ben discussed their next plan of action. They were the ones who kidnapped the boy right after saving him from the goblin, and now they were going to demand a ransom for him. Ben was a little worried, but Sun felt confident. He knew that this world would soon be destroyed, so he didn't think about the consequences. Suddenly, the blonde felt infected mana. It was being whispered by the cat Beth, who had already arrived at the scene, and Sun immediately noticed an unusual animal. At this moment, the cat received a reward. However, she didn't know yet exactly how to use it. Meanwhile, the dream was approaching. Holding his hand behind his back, the blonde created a dagger. He was able to read the contents of Beth's message because he has that ability. Only Sun was surprised that the cat was also a player. While the animal's attention was riveted on the system, the boy threw a dagger at it, but she managed to dodge. She understood how to use the object she received and turned into a vampire. The blonde was surprised that someone had managed to dodge his blow. Beth received her next task, to detain suspicious people. The reward is one of 5 source fragments. The vampire was going to dismember Sun and extract information from him, but the boy chose death instead. Beth didn't understand what was happening. The fact is that Sun did not receive a task regarding the cat, so he was not going to do anything. He knew his boss would react, and so it happened. In an instant, a system appeared with the task of killing a vampire. The reward is 10 billion won. Now Sun got what he wanted, and he instantly created another dagger for himself. Beth guessed that the blonde belonged to the Empty Fantasy Guild, and her knowledge also interested the enemy. A PvP zone in the form of a digital dome has been activated for the duration of the battle. Now no one will see what's going on inside. Sun attacked first and cut off Beth's head. The vampire barely had time to activate the Mist skill. In response, Beth applied Bloodbath territory. Sun actively jumped over to avoid getting into its area of effect. But then, bloody giant hands appeared and aimed at the blonde. While dodging them, Sun realized that a vampire's skills only covered a certain area. It is unable to move. Having calculated the active zones, the blonde threw his knives at them. The bloody hands were instantly destroyed. Balancing on the dagger, Sun avoided contact with the vampire's skill zone. Suddenly, the boy dipped his finger into a bloodbath, and then he tasted the blood. Beth was simply stunned. She had never seen anything like it before. Instead, Sun's eyes filled with eerie madness. He had already realized that simple physical attacks were ineffective against a vampire, and so he decided to use his trump card, the invisibility mask. Within seconds, Sun disappeared from sight, but Beth could feel his energy. The enemy immediately rushed to the attack. He managed to injure the vampire's neck. During the attack, Beth activated fog so the enemy was unable to finish the job. The vampire felt that the wound on her neck was quite deep and tried to stop the bleeding with her mana. Meanwhile, Sun analyzed the enemy. Fighting Beth is not easy. She has a skill that prevents the blonde from moving freely on the ground. However, the boy noticed that the vampire was easily provoked by him, and so at every opportunity he called Beth a monster. Enraged, the vampire activated the executioner's hands. With his taunts, Sun kept all of his opponent's attention on himself, and then he ordered his accomplice to attack. Sun's accomplice attacked Beth from behind. There is less than a minute left until the end of the activation of the right to autonomous action item. When the vampire disappeared, the villain thought the matter was closed. But at that moment, Beth appeared in the form of a bat. She dealt with the vile attacker in an instant. The girl's attention was drawn to two more scoundrels who were rushing to the blonde's aid, and at that moment Sun attacked from behind. Beth fought off the executioner's hands. Then the other two attacked. The vampire caught one with bloody hands. However, then she was attacked by another attacker. Sun instantly rushed to attack to inflict fatal damage. But at the moment of impact, he noticed that the bat was smiling. She instantly took on the form of a cat and the sword blow was inflicted on Sun's ally. And then the vampire pulled on the threads of infected mana. Beth imprisoned the blonde with them. She hid her energy in the bloodbath territory and set traps. And now she's ready to destroy the monster. In fact, the vampire was indifferent to Sun's provocation. Thus, it created the illusion of success for the enemy. But the blonde wasn't upset about this because these two would meet again. After that, Sun died. But Beth was left with the feeling that he had simply disappeared somewhere. However, the system notified the completed task and issued a reward. The next day, the main character took the cat to the veterinary clinic early in the morning. Beth's condition really scared him. But when Joon-seoh learned that the vampire was fighting against the Empty Fantasy Guild, he was stunned. Beth said that only one boy, Sun, stood out. Everything else turned out to be completely normal. Then the cat admitted that she had defeated those villains and received a reward. Now it has the ability to return to its original form on its own. It turned out that the source fragment is part of the lost skills. The vampire was hoping for a greeting from Joon-seoh, but he just kept asking questions. Resigned, Beth reported that she was going to extract some information from Sun, but he suddenly died. Then Joon-seoh guessed that the villain's body had exploded. He had already seen this in his memories. Suddenly, at that very moment, someone knocked on the door. The main character wasn't expecting guests, so he was a bit confused. But when he opened the door, he noticed a bird monster there, who was the boss on the islands of the endless sky. The guy immediately closed the door. The bird began to make noise, demanding the return of the debt. And attracting unnecessary attention was of no use to the main character. Dissatisfied neighbors have already started to come out into the corridor. But by this time, Joon-seoh had already taken the black bird. There were many questions in the boy's head and no answers. On top of everything, the monster was also hungry. Joon-seoh found a can of cat food and gave it to the bird. Fortunately, the monster liked this food. Then the main character decided to ask the bird a few questions, although this idea seemed absurd to him from the very beginning. In the end, the guy managed to clarify something. A friend helped the bird get out of the gate. This is a little blonde boy. It was he who sent the monster after the player who violated the rules of the game. And this boy wants to make the game fair. Meanwhile, Les was in an isolated dimension. He tried to learn at least something about the monster system, but they were all ordinary mobs. Once Les heard that more players were needed to create weapons. He was eagerly collecting infected mana, but he didn't know exactly how to apply it. Only now did Les realize everything. When the end of the world came, a black bird appeared in the sky. He came to hear the prayers of those who were in despair. The guy doesn't remember what he asked for then, but now Les knows exactly how to save all the people who have been turned into toys. This time he will destroy the system. It is simply necessary to create a weapon that will be able to destroy the deity. A few days later, the head of the Hengmu Guild, Wu Hein, went on a business trip again. On the way, she talked to Tae-hyung. The man shared his thoughts on the emergence of the system only 20 years after the rift appeared. The world became like a game invented by an evil deity out of boredom. In addition, immediately after the discovery of the rider and the priestess, the executioner Les appeared. Then Tae-hyung talked about his last meeting with Joon-seoh. Up until this point, the berserker didn't really believe the protagonist's stories about the future. But recently, Joon-seoh showed a photo of a black bird that tracked a guy through infected mana. The main character plans to use the monster and its ability to sense special energy. With the help of the bird, it will be possible to identify dungeons with an error in rank. And so that the creature would not disappear, the main character made a contract with it. In the future, Yong-seon plans to join a branch of the mass murder guild, but Tae-hyung didn't understand what the main character was talking about because his guild doesn't have branches. The fact is that all this happened later in the hero's memories. In a past life in an unrecognizable dungeon with Beth, no one except Taehyun survived. After that, the Shinhwa guild disbanded, and Taehyung created a subsidiary guild, Sanha, and took everyone who was left from Shinhwa there. But Joon-seon plans to do it earlier and thus cultivate the heroes of the future. Only now did Taehyung wonder about his past life. And it turned out that the berserker was found dead on the street in broad daylight as if an S rank was worthless. And then the criminal was never found. This time, Joon-seong prepared and brought Taehyung a weapon for protection. This is an A-rank sword capable of withstanding the user's mana flash. Already at the first meeting with Taehyung, Yong-seon understood why his weapons broke so quickly. Swords cannot withstand the flow of mana. The protagonist would like to give the berserker Leviathan, but Taehyun doesn't have the infected mana to support him. And so Joon-seon created a sword that could withstand at least 3 of a berserker's maximum mana discharges. The boy planned to meet Woo-hain soon, but the S-rank healer flew to another country. Meanwhile, Taehyung focused on creating a subsidiary guild, Sanha. 2 candidates have already been selected by Joon-seong. A few days later, a team of 4 people went into the dungeon. A test for new members of the Sanha guild is to take place there. Dojin and Jong-seon went into the dungeon with the 2 newcomers. The test must be passed by B-rank tracker Jarek, class Reflective Injector, and C-rank mage Sam of the Teleporter class. A misunderstanding immediately arose between these guys. An argument began. Sam was annoyed by Jericho's whining, but the tracker did not give in. The guys were so carried away that they didn't even notice the monster nearby. But when the creature attacked the hunters, Jong-seon reacted. He put up a shield. Dojin rushed to help, but the main character stopped him. Jong-seon invited Jarek and Sam for a reason. In the future, they will make a great tandem. These 2 will complete the task together without unnecessary conversation. And now a test awaits the tracker and the magician. They need to defeat the local monsters. These are humanoid monsters of gender. They have a class D. Before starting, Johnson set a condition. Jericho and Sam must win using a baseball bat and a tennis racket. The guys were stunned, but there was no turning back. The monster was advancing. Jericho and Sam picked up the items that Jong-seon had given them, but they had no idea how they would help in the battle. The main character actively gave instructions. Thus, the boys learned that the items they received had special features. A baseball bat can change the direction of a flying object at the user's will after a hit. If no direction is selected, the object will fly towards an ally. And a tennis racket can increase the power of a shot. Jericho has the shape-shifting skill, and therefore he can turn any object into a ball. All his life, the boy considered this skill to be complete crap. But the reason was that he didn't know how to use it. Suddenly, Genderuvo let out a terrifying scream. After that, 2 more monsters joined the hunters' Naga warriors. They are half humans, half snakes. Dojin took on the task of restraining the monsters. Following Yong-seon's instructions, Jarek turned his shield into a ball, and then he struck the monster with his bat. Just before hitting the ball, it turned into a shield again and hit the monster in a gender-bending manner. Jong-seon created another shield for Jericho to reinforce the skill. The guy hit again, but the Naga warrior dodged the attack. Sam instantly teleported to catch the ball, and then he used the racket skill Heavy Hit. With incredible force, the shield struck the Naga warrior and destroyed him. The other monster was also quickly dealt with. The newcomers were stunned. Jericho and Sam truly complement each other in battle. The test is over. But the newcomers didn't understand where Johnson got the items with special features. They had never heard of such a thing before. But they decided that these were the secrets of one of the 3 great guilds. Dojin led Jericho and Sam to the exit, and Jong-seon stayed to defeat the boss. The main character found a hidden part of the dungeon. It is in such places that you can get valuable rewards, but also meet stronger opponents. The boy came here on the instructions of the blackbird. The animal had been in the hero's pocket all this time, shrinking in size. A few days before, the bird Morok and Jinsen signed a contract. The protagonist must help the bird collect infected mana in exchange for the final reward. And it is the ability to create weapons capable of killing a deity. After Morok gets his back, he will simply disappear because that is his role. But until then, Jong-seon and the bird will cooperate. Morok pecked at the front door, and in a second, the path to the hidden area opened. The main character entered the room. The entire space was filled with contaminated mana. Jong-seon will not be able to absorb the infected mana until he defeats the boss and purifies it. It was not for nothing that the boy took the purifying dart with him. Joon-seong crafted it from an incredible amount of refined magic stones and cores. The boss of the hidden area, the Naga lady, appeared almost immediately. And from the first attack, Joon-seoh escaped with the help of the purifying dart tied to the rope. The Naga Mistress's level is B. This monster has the ability Hide, meaning it can disappear and appear in another location. Having discovered the monster, the protagonist threw a swarm of swords at it. But the Naga Mistress used mana corrosion and the weapon dissolved. Joon-seoh never expected to be able to defeat the monster with ordinary swords. For this, he has a special weapon, the demonic sword Fragarak. The Naga lady felt that this was dangerous. She tried to dodge. But Joon-seoh managed to cut off the enemy's hand. Once again, the Naga lady resorted to hiding. The angry creature hid behind and attacked with a cloud of poison. Fortunately, the cleansing dart has the feature of dealing with poison within a 5-meter radius. But after that, the monster used mana corrosion. As long as Joon-seoh is in the poison cloud area, his mana will be depleted. And so the boy tried to escape again with the help of a tied dart. But he received a blow from the Naga lady and fell to the ground. There is no more mana left. The boy couldn't even lift the sword of Fragarak. Delighted, the boss of the hidden area rushed to attack. But the main character still had a trump card. The cleansing dart also has the recovery feature. Once a day, it can restore the user's mana reserves. Joon-seoh seized the opportunity and pointed the sword Fragara at the Naga lady. The battle is over. The protagonist absorbed the purified infected mana and gained the new skill, Disassemble and Assemble. And then he started collecting useful items. The first thing Joon-seoh did was take the poisonous fang of the Naga lady. With his new skill, the boy can disassemble the poisoning item into its components and then assemble a new one. And with this, the main character decided not to delay. He immediately disassembled the purifying dart. From it I received 3 magic stones, a purified spirit core and a giant's finger, and then activated the gather for the Naga Mistress's poison fang and the purified spirit core. From these 2 components, Joon-seoh obtained an A-level item capable of significantly increasing the user's mana. The main character already knew how it worked, because he did it in a past life. And so the boy, without hesitation, injured himself with a cleaned fang. The transformation has begun. This is a rather complicated process that is difficult to go through, but the result is worth it. After a few minutes of suffering, the pain was gone. Minimum preparation is complete. The main character has doubled his mana. Physical performance also improved. Agility and strength are now equal to a B-rank fighter. Joon-seoh also gained the skill Aura of Purification, which neutralizes poison of B rank and below. Now the guy has reached C rank, but it's not going to stop there. There is another useful item in the body of the Naga lady. The main character found the monster's essence crystal. It is capable of curing any poisoning above B rank. Meanwhile, the hunt for hunters continued in the dungeons, and the same blonde son who lost to the cat Beth was doing it. For killing a C rank hunter, the villain received 500 million won, and so he immediately opened a premium store. But there are much more expensive items there. Sun decided to save up some more money, and immediately a notification about an additional quest with a reward of 1 billion appeared in front of him. With that amount, Sun will be able to buy himself a B-rank gate destroyer. While the villain was browsing the goods in the system, he was being monitored. The agent of the mass murder guild was going to report the criminal, but did not have time. The dream found him and killed him. As soon as Taehyung found out about this, he immediately informed the main character. The same events occurred in a past life. Joon-seoh knows that the association is deliberately not spreading information about this so as not to create panic. Around this same time, another person is expected to be attacked, and Joon-seoh is going to stop the villains from doing that. Thus, all the attention of the criminals will be precisely focused on the main character. Taehyung was also going to help, but the boy asked the berserker to do something different. Just then, Shinhwa Guild Secretary Seo-hee was returning from work. She moved slowly in a wheelchair with her dog, and she managed to notice that she was being followed. Seo-hee couldn't stand it anymore and asked the pursuer to show up and explain what was going on. The deputy of the Mangan Mass Murder Guild came out and admitted that he was doing everything for Seo-hee's safety. And at that moment, an armed son attacked the secretary from a dark alley. Mengun prevented him from executing the blow. The defender immediately activated Petrification of Skin, and Song used the first sword technique, Phantom Flash, and struck the opponent. Then he immediately swung his sword to kill the secretary. But again, he failed to strike because the sword got stuck in the shield created by Joon-seoh. The dream was just crazy. He could finish the job in a matter of seconds, but someone keeps interrupting him. Joon-seoh activated the World of the Grid and created a multitude of swords for the next attack. Sun was amazed. Why did someone so skilled appear here just a few months after the system was launched? First there was the cat Beth, and now there was another one. Joon-seoh attacked, but the villain was quite fast and managed to avoid being hit. Sun realized that the cat and Joon-seoh were working together, and then he used his invisibility mask. Fortunately, the main character already knew that the enemy could use it. Sun sneaked behind Jung-seon's back and thought he had outwitted his opponent, but it was too predictable. The protagonist instantly created several grenades and tossed them next to the villain. After the explosion, Sun lost his ability to see. At this time, Joon-seoh activated the Gathering and created the poisonous dagger of the Naga Lord. But the enemy managed to sense the infected mana and repelled the attack. The secretary decided to help the main character. She used the Communicate with Animals skill and endowed the dog with mana. Sun began to see again and immediately rushed to the attack, but he was stopped by the transformed dog, Then Joon-seoh managed to hit the villain with a poisonous dagger. Angry Sun threw the dog away, and only then did he notice that he had been poisoned. Meanwhile, the main character created Fragarak and carried out the attack. Only it was not possible to hit the enemy. Sleep eluded, and he was lucky to avoid even the next attack with spears. Then the villain used the second sword technique, Way of the Deadly Ghost. Joon-seoh rushed to Sohee's defense. Having created a wall of shields, the hero barely managed to withstand the force of the blow. He spent almost all his mana to block just one blow from his opponent. But Joon-seoh hoped that the poison had already penetrated deep enough into Seong's body. So now the hero has only to use the latest technique correctly. The blonde couldn't accept losing to someone who had only been playing for a few months. The dream attacked again, but at the moment of impact, his weapon stopped. Joon-seoh used Link and took control of the enemy's sword, and then he took Sun's hand. In this state, and even under the influence of poison, the villain will no longer be able to use mana, and he won't even be able to die and be reborn, as he did in the fight with Beth. At this moment, Sohee decided to thank the savior, and when Joon-seoh's attention switched to the secretary, an unusual butterfly flew to Seong. The insect landed on a pool of the blonde's blood, and that place suddenly bloomed with red flowers. The dream instantly teleported. Moreover, the rescuer restored the boy's lost limb. The vampire Isabella did it. She was sent by the boss of Empty Fantasy to help. The vampire is now found at the boss level, but Sun warned his ally that this world was not so simple. Isabella decided to give the blonde a B-rank gate destroyer. Then I reminded him that he only had one rebirth left, and that's why you should approach the game more responsibly. Meanwhile, Shinhwa Guild head Stan raced towards Seohee at full speed as soon as he learned of the attack. He was very happy when he saw that everything was fine with the secretary. But now I wanted to know all the details. The secretary explained to the boss that Joon-seoh and the Mass Murder Guild had saved her. They dealt with the attacks in the dungeons and figured out that Sohee was in danger, and so we ended up in the right place at the right time. Stan also wanted to get an explanation from Johnson, but Johnson was sure the man wouldn't believe it. The head of the Hengmu Guild, Wu Hain, had already tried to explain something. Johnson was about to leave, but Stan stopped him. He understands that most people don't think too highly of him. However, the Shinhwa chairman did not forget to thank the hero for saving Seohee. After leaving the room, Joon-seoh called Beth. He showed the vampire a photo of what the butterfly had done during the battle with Sun. Beth recognized the bloodbath skill Red Flowers, and he knows that only one vampire could do this, Isabella. And this means that players from another world have infiltrated the Earth. Their level matches Beth's level before she became a familiar. Therefore, the main character needs to immediately develop skills to be able to confront the enemy. Thanks to his memories, Joon-seoh knows about unusual dungeons. They are different from gates and exist to obtain relics. And it was to such a dungeon that the main character went. He instantly found a spatial crack. Only a few can enter there. But the guy has a key that can open any door. The Blackbird Morok took up the task and opened a passage. The main character entered. A side quest has begun. Joon-seoh needs to defeat the guard to move on and receive the reward. Already at the entrance, the Black Tiger of the Black Forest attacked the boy. The guy wanted to move on as quickly as possible, so he immediately used the demonic sword, Fragarak. At one point, Johnson chopped the monster, but the tiger has the ability to disintegrate into smaller forms when more damage is done than necessary. It is necessary to distinguish the main form from the doubles and impress it. Only Joon-seoh doesn't need it. After his numerous attacks, the tigers became very numerous and very small. Suddenly, one of them attacked the boy from behind and bit his hand. But it didn't even hurt because the tiger became a little kitten, so the hero managed to find and destroy the main form. The first quest is over and the way forward is opened. Joon-seoh entered the portal. At this stage, the hero must defeat his double. He has the same level as the player, but thanks to his memories, the boy knows it will be easy. The opponents created a multitude of swords and aimed at each other. The strengths and skills of both are equal. But there is one but. The doppelganger does not have the demonic sword Fragarak. This weapon increased the main character's swordsmanship skills to the maximum, and he managed to repel the double's attack and cut it in half. The enemy instantly turned into gray matter, but within a second, the double's body began to recover. Joon-seoh did not miss this moment and inserted the poisoned dagger of the Naga lady into the gray mass. After regeneration, the physical performance of the double increased by 150%. He attacked continuously. However, Joon-seoh fought back skillfully. During this time, the poison spread throughout the doppelganger's body. Now he cannot use the skill, and immediately after that, the enemy's mana ran out. Then the main character summoned a poisoned dagger, and the weapon in the enemy's body pulled him towards Joon-seoh. The boy met the double with a strong blow from Fragarak. The enemy's body turned back into gray matter and the protagonist regained the poisoned dagger. This ends the quest. As a reward, Joon-seoh received a bronze mirror and a scroll to enhance one of his skills. Without thinking twice, the guy opened the list of skills and selected Creation. The scroll took effect instantly. Increasing the skill level opened up the possibility of combining elements, and Joon-seoh decided to combine lightning with his weapon. In the future, the boy will be able to use this element with any created weapon. Finally, Joon-seoh collected the double's gray substance into a flask. Another artifact, a bronze mirror, will also come in handy. The value of this item could not be deciphered for a long time, and it manifests itself in combination with the other two artifacts that Joon-seoh is going to retrieve. In the next stage, the boy defeated the fox monster and received a sphere and a bronze sword. Then I had to fight a man-eating goblin. For the victory, the hero received the monster's hair and a bell. Now he had all the necessary elements to create the item. Joon-seoh combined the goblin hair, the fox sphere, the bronze mirror, the remains of the double, and the dissolved magic stones. The artifacts began to resonate with each other, and as a result, the heavenly jade belt was formed. It allows you to copy the skills of a weaker or equal-ranked opponent. Along with this, Joon-seoh received a bonus and became a hero candidate. The guy got one step closer to completing the final quest, which he failed in his past life. But this time everything will be different. The protagonist continued to combine elements, and now he took the ring Trader's Greed in his hands and combined it with the celestial jade belt. So Joon-seoh received an S-rank item, the Ruler's Greed ring. Now he will be able to take away the target's mana. Finally, the hero solved his painful issue with energy reserves. After that, the main quest, the hero's path, was unlocked. Joon-seoh instantly teleported to the hidden dimension of the Heavenly Kingdom. In his past life, the boy managed to find only 6 heroes. But this time, Joon-seoh is going to find everyone. Now the boy must complete the celestial creature's quest to receive the title of hero. The system moved Jinsun to the temple of Queen Sobel, known for her insatiable greed. Her role is to test hero candidates. But the queen immediately sensed that the main character was only a C-level, and so she was sure that the guy would not pass her test. Showing mercy, Sable gave Joon-seoh a chance to leave before it was too late, but the main character assured that he would be able to cope. The boy's self-confidence initially made the queen laugh, but then she was suddenly overcome with anger. Despite this, Joon-seoh insisted on the test. Sable is the queen of the little star. In her past life, she was responsible for Joon-seoh, one of the 6 heroes who accepted the final quest. This deity is capable of granting and depriving abilities. Queen Sable is a perfect option for Johnson, as she allows you to use items. In the end, the celestial being agreed to test the boy. She herself became curious about what this brave man was capable of. The hero's task is to defeat one of the 4 evils of chaos and its supporters. Joon-seoh teleported to the test site. Already at the entrance to the temple, he came across 2 Nathi monsters. They possess great strength and size. It is not difficult for a team of hunters to defeat them, but fighting against them alone is difficult. But Joon-seoh immediately used the gathering of goblin hair, giant's finger, and magic stones. This combination created a devil mask. The item contains a goblin spirit that can be released to absorb evil, and also stops the effects of curses. The goblin spirit is a protector capable of reducing the magical abilities of ghosts by 50%. Thanks to this, Nathi was destroyed. Then bandaged soldiers ran out of the temple they were defending. Joon-seoh instantly activated the World of the Grid. With a swarm of daggers, he destroyed everyone except the magician. For him, the main character used the Ruler's Greed ring and began to absorb mana. At this moment, help arrived. Joon-seoh activated Link and took control of his opponent's swords, and then he combined them with lightning. Everyone was defeated. Then the main enemy, Chaos, appeared. This monster is half tiger, half human, and he enjoyed watching the main character. One of the 4 evils, Chaos is a powerful ghost who specializes in curses. The enemy decided to use the cursed monster Yomi against Johnson. Freed from the tube, Yomi let out a cry of pain. If you fail to repel the attack of the cursed monster, it will absorb the boy's soul. Joon-seoh instantly used the devil mask. The masked defender launched an attack on Yomi. The scream of pain was stopped. In addition, thanks to the mask protector, The cursed monster's skill was reduced by 50%. Then chaos began to attack. Johnson strengthened himself with the help of Fragarak. He managed to block several of his opponent's blows. However, the difference in strength between them is very large and the main character took damage. Chaos resorted to the curse. The souls of deceased allies left their bodies and targeted the hero, but Joon-seoh instantly destroyed them with spears created at the beginning of the battle. Then Joon-seoh increased the sword's penetrating power with lightning and struck chaos with it. While the monster was removing the Fragarak blade from its shoulder, the boy touched the enemy and stole its skill. Thus, Joon-seoh became Yomi's new boss. The cursed monster immediately activated a scream of pain against chaos. The half-tiger was going to finish him off right away. But at the last moment, Joon-seoh prevented this from happening, depriving the monster of its limbs. Now the boy only has one more minute to hold out because after that, Yomi will absorb the soul of chaos. The enraged boss transformed into a giant beast. Then he rushed at the main character with all his might. But the boy again summoned the devil's mask with a protector. This is what protected Joon-seoh from several curses of chaos. In parallel with magical attacks, the main character also had to fend off physical ones. But thanks to the World of the Grid skill, the guy did great. The main thing for him is to hold out for another 50 seconds, and then Yomi will do his thing. Another attempt by Chaos to hit the target with a white tiger attack failed. To contain the continuous attacks, Joon-seoh created a chain. He managed to immobilize the enemy, and then he also used lightning. But within a few seconds, the monster broke free. He activated Shockwave, and he unleashed all his rage in the next attack. Fortunately, Joon-seoh managed to escape defeat. The guy noticed that the enemy no longer controlled his strength, and therefore felt that he was losing. Suddenly, Chaos sacrificed his paw. For this, he received the skill Black Claws and immediately used it. Sharp spires rained down on the protagonist. He couldn't avoid the damage, and now he won't be able to use mana for an hour. In that joy, Chaos rushed towards Joon-seoh, hoping to finish him off. There are still 10 seconds left before Yomi's soul absorption skill activates. The protagonist used the infected mana and summoned Beth. The vampire stopped one of the four evils with the help of a bloodbath, and held him back until the cursed monster's time came. Chaos still tried to attack Joon-seoh with a shockwave, but it was too late. Yomi began to absorb his former boss, and then he returned to the tube from which he had come out. This item now belongs to Joon-seoh. In the past, Yomi was killed, which is why the item was lost. But this time there was an unexpected bonus. The main character completed the quest and went to the deity for the reward. Queen Sable admitted that she was impressed, but it seemed to her that the guy knew the events in advance, so she decided to find out for herself what was going on and touched the hero's forehead to see the truth. But she immediately recoiled. It turns out that Joon-seoh has already been chosen by a deity much more powerful than her, so the queen's decision is just a step in his plan. Sable awarded the boy the title of hero. All of the hero's characteristics have increased to the maximum, and he has reached level B. As a reward for the quest, Joon-seoh received a golden bow, which increases penetration power by 200%, and also the seed of a blue flower grown in the heavenly gardens. It contains an incredible amount of mana. For a flower to bloom, it needs to be fed items with mana. It was time for Joon-seoh to return home. There are still some things waiting there. Around this time, the hero's city is in complete chaos. After the split in the sky began to shine, the angel of death appeared. At first, people were delighted, but when the system appeared, everyone realized that this creature had come for their souls. The main quest, Night of the Dead, has begun. People began to flee in panic. Fortunately, Taehyung arrived in time to confront the monster. Everything happened exactly as Joon-seoh had warned. The angel of death activated bone spires against the berserker, which began to protrude from the ground. As soon as Taehyung dodged the attack, the bones began to explode. But this time the berserker was lucky. He realized that half the strength would not be enough to defeat the enemy. To break through the protection of the angel of death, you will need to activate the full power of fire. Taehyung rushed to the attack. At first, the monster held back the berserker's fire, but in the end, the player managed to hit the opponent. The angel of death fell dead to the ground, but after a few seconds, black energy gathered around him and revived the angel of death. Fortunately, at that moment, Joon-seoh appeared from the portal. He finished off the monster with a shot from a golden bow. You can prevent the angel of death from reviving by burning his body. Or is it better to immediately attack him with divine power as the main character did? Joon-seoh received the black key for defeating the first monster of the quest. The activation of the global disaster Night of the Dead was caused by the appearance of the first hero. The dead will enter the world of people. Now Joon-seoh needs to prepare and go to the world of the dead to stop them. This is given a week. The situation will become more complicated with each passing day, and after the expiration of the term, the whole world will forever plunge into the night of the dead. At this time, a system notification of a global disaster also reached the scoundrel's son. Only his task was completely different from that of Joon-seoh. The blonde must prevent players from completing the quest and stopping the hero. The guy was stunned when he saw that it was Joon-seoh. Sun noticed that the main character acted as if he knew all the events in advance, and so he guessed that Joon-seoh would go further to find an object that would help defeat the disaster, and he decided to go there himself to wait for the enemy and deal with him. To do this, Sun immediately acquired a dagger capable of generating spatial cracks. Unsuspecting, Joon-seoh went to complete the side quest Palace of Fanatics. He needs to defeat the vampire henchman and find the hidden boss. The main character coped with the first task at once using the World of the Grid skill, and for this he received a cup from which vampires drink blood. It will be useful for creating an item. Joon-seoh still needs to get the magic stones, but there is not enough time to do so. So the boy summoned his familiar and asked him to take care of the matter. Beth felt humiliated when she was assigned to do the dirty work, but she summoned the bloody hands of the bloodbath and took up the crust. Joon-seoh himself rushed to find the hidden boss. Relying on his memories, the boy quickly found the hidden area. However, I was very surprised when I saw that all the monsters inside were already dead. He knew for sure that only one person could enter the spatial crack. However, the dream was already here, and he held in his hand the reward for defeating the hidden boss, the vampire elixir. Almost immediately, Sun launched an attack. Having executed the blow, the blonde was certain that Joon-seoh did not have time to react. But everything turned out to be wrong. The main character protected himself with a shield mask of the devil, and then he immediately attacked the enemy. Sun couldn't believe it. With the title of hero, Joon-seoh's characteristics have increased significantly. Although the blonde still won in speed, the battle was gaining momentum. Sun barely managed to dodge the arrow of the golden bow. Then the main character immediately activated the magic of the demon mask. The smokescreen effect concealed Joon-seoh's location, and he immediately directed Fragarak against the enemy. While Sun blocked the sword strike, the protagonist appeared behind him. He touched the opponent and used the ruler's greed ring to copy the skill. Now Joon-seoh's sword mastery has reached its maximum. Sun made a sharp turn to hit the enemy, but the hero foresaw this and exposed the poisoned sword of the Naga lady. Joon-seoh managed to poison the blonde again. Sun realized that without reinforcements he could not win, so he immediately opened a shop and bought an explosive potion. It has the effect of increasing all indicators. Strengthened by 200%, Sun was ready to continue the fight. He prepared to perform the third sword technique, Destructive Ghost Storm. Thanks to the copied skills, Johnson was not afraid of this attack. The technique has specific sword strikes, although it is similar to a storm. But if you know them, you can easily neutralize this powerful attack. That's exactly what the main character did. Having been defeated, Sun was about to escape using a spatial rift generator. But as soon as he picked up the dagger, Joon-seoh instantly deprived his opponent of his hand. The hero thought that the villain no longer had the ability to regenerate, so he decided to interrogate him. And it turned out that Sun, like the rest of his kind, betrayed the players in their world in order to survive. And now they have been sent into this world to bring chaos and destruction. They have sold their souls and therefore are forced to do whatever they are told to do in order to survive. After this confession, Sun exploded. The main character returned to Beth and noticed that the vampire had already dealt with everything. The guy activated Gathering and combined the vampire's cup, magic stones, and vampire elixir. An object was formed, which Joon-seoh gave to Beth. The vampire was surprised. It turns out that the main character went to this dungeon for her sake. Beth swallowed the newly formed pebble, and in an instant I felt an incredible surge of strength. It was an incredible feeling. Instead of the boost the item was supposed to give, the vampire regained 3/5 of her lost strength. And now it's time to go into the dungeon of world disaster. But the dead didn't linger. Joon-seoh was in the dungeon for 6 hours, but during this time the disaster intensified. When the boy returned, the giant skeleton was already spreading poisonous smoke across the Earth's expanses. The system crashed again. Players need to form a group and stop the disaster in 72 hours. The giant's poisonous smoke has destructive power. Places it hits will turn into the land of the dead. Destruction is happening all over the world. But Joon-seoh didn't understand why events that were supposed to happen in 2 years were happening now. Suddenly Dojin appeared. He reported that Tae-hyung and the head of the Manhwa Guild had gone to deal with the giant, but that was not the right way. Joon-seoh immediately called the berserker, but he was out of range. Then the boy remembered that he had a twin ring and hoped that he could contact Tae-hyung that way. Fortunately, the berserker responded. The protagonist ordered the guild leader to get out of there and head to the nearest station. The giant skeleton is just a vessel for spreading poisonous smoke. In addition, players currently do not have enough strength to destroy the undead. The real threat lies elsewhere. After that, Joon-seoh and Do-jin hurried to the guild office to pick up the valuable items. But along the way, they encountered many human casualties. It was the work of a gang of unknown awakened ones. All victims have the characteristic mark of a vampire bite on their necks. The cat Beth guessed that Isabella had something to do with it. The heroes assumed that the attackers must be somewhere nearby, but it turned out that they were quite close. One of the scoundrels attacked Do-jin, and if Joon-seoh hadn't had time to create a shield, everything could have ended tragically. The attacker's strength was impressive. Then Beth entered the fray. She quickly dealt with one of the vampires, but in an instant another one appeared and attacked Beth. Thanks to the skill Mist, the vampire avoided defeat. Do-jin was stunned when he learned that Beth was Joon-seoh's familiar, but there was no time for explanation. The main character rushed into the attack. There was another female vampire nearby. She strengthened her allies with magic, but while the villain's attention was focused on the allies' battle, Do-jin got close enough. The players worked brilliantly and the entire gang of vampires was killed. It turned out that all the attackers were former prisoners. Suddenly, Do-jin received a call. Min-hee-soo's secretary called. She asked for help. The mass murder guild was attacked by unknown awakened ones, and they already found the girl. The call ended. Joon-seoh and Do-jin reached the guild building in no time, but they encountered a terrible picture there. There were dead bodies lying practically everywhere, and they all died from vampires. However, Min-hee-soo was nowhere to be seen among the victims. The team decided to split up. Beth would check the lower floors. Do-jin will start moving from the middle of the building. And Joon-seoh went to the very top to the office of the Mass Murder Guild. And there, two A-rank vampires, Nobis and Shen, were already waiting for the main character. They were hoping that a really strong hunter would come, but they thought that Joon-seoh was just another weakling. Meanwhile, the main character noticed Min-hee-soo's bag among the opponents. He wanted to know where the secretary was. However, he only received an aggressive attack from Nobis. Joon-seoh raised his shield and immediately directed a dozen arrows at the enemy. If it weren't for the armor, the vampire would have been defeated. Joon-seoh continued to attack the world of the net with arrows, but the vampire covered himself with a shield. The hero did not stop, but the vampire Shen prevented him from hitting the target. She covered her comrade with a black shield, but as soon as the defense was gone, Joon-seoh resorted to attacking with the tricks of creating weapons, and this time he managed to cut off Nobis's hand. But it was not possible to deliver the fatal blow. Sheena repelled the attack with an aura, and it was so strong that the main character flew back. Then, right before the boy's eyes, Nobis's hand regenerated. It became clear that without enhanced divine power, they could not be defeated. And so, when the two enemies rushed to attack, Joon-seoh displayed the devil's shield mask. Then he shot many arrows into the backs of his enemies. The vampires laughed at the insignificance of this attack. However, this was just a diversionary maneuver. While the villains were taking cover from the arrows, Joon-seoh fired an arrow from his golden bow. Nobis was finished. Then the main character deprived Shen of his legs. He was in no hurry to kill the vampire because he was going to ask a few questions. Just then, Do-jin and Beth arrived. They found Min-hee-soo. The secretary wasn't killed, and now Joon-seoh knew why. The villains were going to use her to get the guild's items and then deliver everything to Isabella. But fortunately, the heroes managed to prevent this. Suddenly, Taehyung contacted Joon-seoh with the help of the twins' rings. He and Stan were surrounded by vampires. Berserk asked the hero to head to the station, but that's where the connection ended. The effect of the twin rings' telepathic communication was exhausted. At this point, Taehyung, along with the head of the Mass Murder Guild, were already fighting off the vampires. The opponents were not very strong, but there were many of them. Suddenly, Isabella appeared. She expected more from S-rank hunters. Without thinking twice, Stan decided to kill the vampire leader and rushed to attack Isabella. But the vampire stopped the attacker in an instant. She activated blood magic and a web of red flowers sprouted from Stan's shoulder. The villain was in no hurry to kill Taehyung because she intended to use him by turning him into a vampire. She admitted that among all the awakened, only Joon-seoh was worthy of attention. He alone showed impressive results in development. When Isabella's attention was fully focused on Taehyung, Stan took action. He deliberately succumbed to the vampire so that she would lose her vigilance. And when the opportune moment came, Stan used Abyssal Strike and struck the villain. However, Isabella instantly responded to the attack with a multitude of butterflies. The insects spread their pollen and a smokescreen formed around the hunters. Nothing was visible through it. In addition, the vampire's ability reduces the enemy's strength by 30% and slowly depletes mana. Stan tried to break through the smoke screen, but it didn't work. Then Taehan got to work. He asked Stan to take all the people and go to a safe place. To break through the smoke screen, the berserker activated the full power of his explosion skill, and he succeeded. A hole appeared in the barrier. Convinced that Taehan had a plan, Stan complied with the request and began to flee, and the berserker prepared to use his secret weapon, Heavenly Flame. The fire engulfed the entire surrounding area. Meanwhile, the guild secretary suggested going to help the boss, but Joon-seoh assured that Taehyung would cope. A few minutes later, the main character's words were confirmed. Taehyung called and said he was fine. He immediately thanked Joon-seoh for the reliable weapon. However, after using the skill, it did collapse. Taehyung managed to defeat Isabella thanks to the skill book that the main character gave him. Then the berserker and Jin-seon agreed to meet at the guild office to discuss further actions. After talking to Taehyung, the secretary gave the hero an item. This thing was accidentally obtained by the head of the mass murder guild a long time ago. The item was considered unnecessary, but that's exactly what the vampire scum tried to take from Hisa. The sleeping stone of the dwarf shows its value only after disaster strikes. After awakening the item, the owner will receive the skill, Create a Weapon that Kills Giants. Suddenly, a system message caught everyone's attention. The first night after the disaster is activated is approaching. Monsters will begin to appear all over the world. For defeating them, players will receive points, which can then be exchanged for items. But the main objective of the quest is to defeat the field boss. Johnson created several items that would neutralize the giant skeleton's poisonous smoke. Thus, the mass murder guild will become a safe place where people can hide. And the main character himself will be able to take care of the field boss, whom he immediately set out to find. Upon entering the monster's zone, Joon-seoh was given the task of awakening the item Sleeping Dwarf Stone. The field boss enchants people with his requiem, then takes their souls. Thanks to this, he gains the ability to be reborn in another place after death. Joon-seoh hoped that the enemy had not had time to charm many people. But when he entered the temple, he realized that quite a few victims had already gathered, and among those people in the hall was also sitting the archer goddess Han Chia. Joon-seoh quietly reached the girl and brought her out of her trance. It turned out that after the disaster was activated, Han Chia took it upon herself to evacuate people. But then vampires appeared. During the battle, the girl lost consciousness and regained consciousness in the temple. The main character realized that the vampires were trying to summon the boss. He took Han Chia with him and was going to disrupt the ceremony. At this moment, one of the vampires was performing a ritual to summon the field boss. After completing the task, he will be able to survive the apocalypse and travel to another world. But then the main character appeared. Joon-seoh destroyed the ceremonial hall guard and shot the vampire with a divine arrow. Immediately after that, another vampire appeared and began to attack the main character. She turned out to be quite strong. This person learned to use the aura and combine it with lightning. Resisting the attacks of the villain was not easy. Besides, help arrived along with the vampire, but Han Chia quickly dealt with them. Beth joined the fight. Using blood magic, she destroyed everyone who tried to harm Joon-seoh. Even the aura user Beth defeated without any problems. At this point, Han Chia had already gotten rid of all the vampires outside and joined the team. The protagonist thought the task was completed, but then a system notification arrived. The vampire who performed the ceremony sacrificed his body and summoned the field boss. In a moment, the Dark Bishop appeared. His level is beyond A. This boss is capable of absorbing the souls of people in nearby areas and turning them into an army of the dead. The monster activated the ability. His energy began to envelop Joon-seoh's body, but at that moment, the main character remembered one way, and then he quickly approached the monster. Joon-seoh used rare materials recorded in his past life and activated the gathering. In an instant, a sword made from the combination of human souls was in his hands. It can be used to kill the Dark Bishop and return souls to their owners.